Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here for your latest episode of Sloppy Spoilers. On this episode, we're going to be talking about and dissecting Spider-Man No Way Home. We got a lot to say about this, so I want to get right to it. So let me welcome my co-host. Welcome to Dave Nemesis Howard.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And I got to say about this movie, I initially watched it. It came out, and I enjoyed it, but there are a lot of problems. So I'm going to send the bat signal up because this was not the heroes we needed. So I'll just say that.
That's a shots fired on that opening salvo. Welcome to Steve Shade Wing Sellers. What's up, Steve?
Well, if you always expect disappointment, you'll never be disappointed. And that is this film in a nutshell. Although, to be fair, I can see why people like this movie, why it has the following that it has. It definitely tries to be that fan pleaser film, but there are a lot of problems underneath it, especially with Tom Holland Spider-Man as a character. And to me, that kind of got in the way of my enjoyment of the film, but we'll get into all of that.
We're going to get into that in detail. Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Fate Bracey. What's up, Jeff?
Hey there, everybody. I actually enjoyed watching this movie in the theater quite a bit. But then as I started to digest it, I realized this gave us both the best of Spider-Man and the worst of Spider-Man all in the same film.
Amen.
And there were two different characters.
Right. Yeah. Now, let's start right there with initial impressions, and I'll give you mine. The way this movie worked and works is it's a lot of fun if you don't think about it.
Yeah.
Okay? If you just kind of shut your mind off, if you just go along with the ride, if you just kind of ooh and ah and woo in the places you're supposed to, then that is what produces the high level of enjoyment. If you take a step back and analyze this film critically on any number of levels, you're going to be shaking your head like, what?
So it's basically Michael Bay's Transformers.
And there's some things that it does, and you guys know what I'm talking about. There's some things that it does that is such a basic violation of the Spider-Man character. Now, it's to the point now where I have to have this conversation on Twitter every day. I don't understand why I have to keep having the same conversation, except for maybe I'm dealing with, I don't know. But see, you cannot twist the foundations and the moorings and the structure and the setup of a character, but so far. If you push it too far out of the boundaries of its definition and its story world, it ceases to be that character. I want you to notice that just about every other genre doesn't seem to have a problem with that. It's just superheroes, for some reason that I have yet to figure out, that keep believing that they can create these takes that are so unlike, although we saw it happen with Star Wars too. So maybe it's science fiction and fantasy in general, but I know it seems to be focused on superheroes. And that is what happens in this movie. There's this one scene that we're going to talk about that any long-term Spider-Man fan, any Spider-Man comic fan, is so abhorrent. Your mouth probably fell open when it happens.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And you're still scratching your head like, what? And when we get to that scene, I'm also going to clear up some confusion, which again, because I'm to the point where like I'm repeating posts. Like I post something and a few weeks later, I got to post the same thing again. Like I just made a post about how there's always been diversity in comics. That's my second or third time saying that. Because we can go back to the 30s and the 40s, and we can find Hispanic characters, female characters, African-American characters, African characters, which is not the same thing, Asian characters, just on and on and on. And here for the last 10 or 15 years, we've been listening to these crazy people talking about ain't no diversity and we need diversity and inclusion. Okay. Maybe you haven't met me, but I'm not going to be bullied, especially by somebody I don't know what they're talking about. So this is what I mean. And when I watch this movie, you can't think about it. You got to just go with it. That, for the most part, is the brilliance of the studio and the directors in the normie appeal. Not going to think about it. Don't care about the comic books. Don't care about all that. It's just a fun ride. Okay. So let me hear from my co-host. Let me hear your initial impressions on the film, and then we are going to get into details. Start with Nims.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. As far as diversity in comics, just real quick, I mean, there's tons. Hispanic characters. There was El Diablo, the very first one, was a Zorro ripoff, who was one of the original action heroes way back in the day. So, you just start from there. And that's Hispanic characters, and I'm Hispanic, so I paid attention to that. But there were plenty of other characters, female characters, African-American characters, Asian characters. They were all there, That said, to me, the phrase that sums up this movie best is empty calories. This is the Snickers bar that I'm eating when I should be eating a salad and a nice, pork cutlet or something. It tastes good, but it's probably not doing me a whole heck of a lot of good, intellectually or, for my diet or whatever, stuff like that. The biggest problem I have with this is, like you hit on, they're just throwing a bunch of things in there. And it really seems like, there were these constant pushes on social media. It's like, oh, we need to have Andrew Garfield. Oh, we need to have Tobey Maguire. Sometimes it seemed like they were listening to what they were saying and just throwing them in there to get them in there and adding scenes in, So it was just this hodgepodge of feel-good moments. And it was enjoyable at the time, but it made no sense, which leads to, you have all these stars coming back to do their cameos, their little bits, as we kick off the multiverse phase of the MCU. May it, prosper, I guess. We'll see what happens with Doctor Strange coming up. But the biggest problem with all that is the problem that I've had forever. And this movie epitomizes it. It's a hashtag that I wish we'd all share. Keep your damn mask on. It is a superhero epidemic in the movies. Keep the damn mask on or don't have it at all. It's one or the other. In the comics, you have the mask for a reason. And everybody these two dudes, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, show up in a whole other universe, and they're just trotting out there going, yeah, I'm Peter Parker. It's like, if you go out there as Spider-Man in the comics, and this, I'm not going to go on a whole full-blown rant. I'm just going to say this right out because I think it's factual. If Peter Parker, outside Civil War, and you saw what happened when he came out in Civil War as Spider-Man, if you come out there and say, I'm Spider-Man, you can expect a pumpkin bomb, delivered to your house in about 5 seconds. So, and that goes for any other, Joker would show up at Wayne Manor in a heartbeat if he knew for a fact that Bruce Wayne was Batman. And the list just goes on and on. So it's just a fundamental, it should be a rule that cannot be broken in comic books is protect your secret identity at all costs. And man, these guys can't keep their masks on long enough. And we've talked about this movie for a little bit, and I don't think this is a spoiler. Credit to Matt Reeves and Pattinson in the new Batman movie, because the man doesn't take his mask off ever. So it's like, at least, you got to give him credit for that, you if you didn't like the movie. So that said, yeah, hashtag keep your damn mask on. It needs to be out there. So
now, before I throw it to Jeff, keying in on something that Nemesis just said, I want you to realize that we've entered into a heavy deconstruction phase for both our heroes. And part of that deconstruction phase has to do with the blurring or the elimination of the secret identity or the need for the secret identity. Or here's another one, because the same thing is going on with Star Trek Picard, punishing the heroes because of all the sacrifice they've made. And we used to look up to them and we used to admire them. And now there's this thing about this type of retaliation and backlash and degradation because the people behind it hate altruism and hate the ideals of being a hero and hate the fact that you do have to keep your identity secret if you're going to be doing stuff like that, especially not being a deputized agent of the law, and especially not with all the enemies that you create in your adventures.
And I'll just add, there's very few heroes that go around with their identity known, and all of them are pretty much rich enough or isolated enough to protect themselves. Fantastic Four, the X-Men,
Captain America.
yeah, but they are few and far between.
Few and far between, and also, you're going to need a break. You're going to need a day off. If everybody knows who you are and you're walking down the street and something happens, maybe you're tired, or maybe you're asleep, or maybe, but it's just this whole thing. But anyway, let me throw it out to Bracy. Let's hear your general impressions of this film before we go into details.
Well, I tell you, that makes Superman's Fortress of Solitude all the more important, doesn't it? Talk about a getaway. And yeah, I think just to address Nemesis's point, that's something I agree with as well. Secret identities are something that is very important. I excuse Peter 2 and Peter 3 because it's not their universe. I guess they figure it doesn't matter in that case, and they're aware that they're not in their home. But I think it stems from the idea that as society, we don't really have privacy anymore. We're spied on by our devices. We got CCTV cameras everywhere. This kind of started with the Ultimates when Marvel tried to revamp the line that there was no more secret identities. People seem to think that's a foolish idea. I think if you were a superhero and you had to deal with supervillains, you would want a secret identity more than anybody in the whole flipping world for the obvious reasons. And also, to your point, DT, I think what they're selling us is no longer the character. If you watch the remake of the Death Race 2000, starring Jason Statham, they make a very interesting point. When the original Frankenstein is killed in his latest race, the warden of the prison who's sponsoring the death race says it's not important who's behind the mask, it's the mask that's important. So that's what we're being sold here. It's the mask, it's the shield, it's the emblem, it's the suit. It's not the character anymore, which is why I feel like these companies who are licensing or owning the properties feel like they can just do whatever. It doesn't matter who's in the suit. It's the suit that's important. That's what you're selling, is the iconography. As for the movie itself, it is indeed very enjoyable. There's a lot that I enjoy, even if it doesn't make sense. I enjoy the interaction between the three Peters most of all. I love like how these guys all cued into being Peter Parker and doing Peter Parker-y things when they're together. I really enjoyed that aspect, and it was a great bit of fan service. I loved it. Visually, it was a lot of fun to watch, but plot-wise, it's kind of a mess. It's all over the place, and as much as I've kind of enjoyed Tom Holland in the MCU, his character is written to be the absolute worst Spider-Man possible, and we'll probably go into the reasons for that a little bit later, because he makes all the most unrealistically Spider-Man decisions. We all know, if you know anything about Spider-Man, it's his fault that Uncle Ben dies, that he is a nerdy kid, he gets powers, he gets arrogant from that, he's going to cash in on it, and because the instant power corrupts him instantly, he suffers a tremendous loss, and he is forever paying for that loss. Now, by the time we get to this film, Peter Parker has enough experience from his previous two movies and his time in the Avengers that he would not be making these super duper dumbass mistakes, and he does like everything wrong until the very end of the film. It's only in the third act that he actually starts to act a bit more like Spider-Man should. And so yeah, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this movie, because Spider-Man has always been my all-time favorite Marvel superhero, and in general my all-time favorite superhero. So this movie's such a mixed bag for me, because I love seeing Spider-Man on the screen. I love seeing him do all the Spider-Man things, but whenever we slow down and I actually have to pay attention to the plot and what the character is doing, that's when I'm kind of pulled out of the experience and like, nah, this ain't working.
Now I'm going to throw this out before I throw it to Steve. I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about from another genre. That genre would be romance.
Mm-hmm.
If you are into a romance genre, there are certain conventions that the stories need to follow, and there can be some tweaking or whatever, but basically they're, forbidden love stories, one way or the other. It's somebody getting together or wanting to be together or want somebody else, something like that. But I want you to notice, because it is one of the longest running and best-selling genres out there, I want you to notice that they don't expect to twist the stories away from their moorings
Mm-hmm.
and still make the fans happy or still not get any pushback. They don't expect that in that genre. They expect the conventions that have been established over the years in the romance genre. And I discovered that nobody has a problem with that. That's why I can't figure out. I have some ideas, but I don't want to name names yet. I can't figure out why people think with science fiction, fantasy, and superheroes in particular, because there's this whole stuff with Picard or whatever, but this genre in particular seems to be the place where people that have no background in the genre or in the stories with the characters and no love for them seem to keep getting the keys to the kingdom so they can twist them beyond recognition. And once again, that I'm gonna throw it to Steve with this film. If you know anything about Spider-Man, and Jeff touched on it, there are reasons that he does what he does, and he is who he is, and he acts the way he acts. Okay, and I'm talking about Stan Lee and Steve Ditko reasons. I'm talking about his first appearance reasons. I'm talking about the lessons they were trying to teach and how that has sustained Spider-Man as a character all throughout these years because of how he came to be. And when you're just going to ignore all that, anyway, Steve, overall thoughts about this film?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close to where all of you are in general. It's just that I'm kind of coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective. I think that Jeff's term love-hate relationship describes how I feel about Spider-Man generally. I want to like what this character is. It's just that a lot of times the way he's written really hits something I really don't like about this character, and that is that he is self-destructive. And and we see this double down in this movie. I will say that when they originally brought in Holland in the not Far From Home,
Civil War,
Homecoming, Civil War, Homecoming. I kind of got the feeling that okay, they were trying to change the character, yes, but I kind of felt like okay, maybe they were going to try to adjust him so he'd be less self-destructive. We've seen in the last two films that is not the case, and in fact, in this movie, it is the worst I've ever seen for some time, which I find amazing because to me, usually a lot of the time, my problem with Peter Parker is that he suffers from a self-destructive martyr complex, and he's a masochist, and he punishes himself so much for the death of Uncle Ben that he makes a lot of really stupid decisions that damage his relationships, that damage people around him, and hurt other people. On the basis that this is the responsible thing, and a lot of times it's not even necessary for him to do those things. They doubled down on it in this movie. I thought they were going to try to get away from it. I couldn't believe it. And Tom Holland's Spider-Man is, I would say, the biggest problem with this movie for me, which is amazing considering the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is the Spider-Man we wanted to see. This is that's the Spider-Man that learned from the mistakes he made in the previous films. He grew as a character. He embodied the ideals of what Spider-Man was about. I liked that Spider-Man. If we had seen this movie center on the Tobey Spider-Man, I probably would have been pretty happy. But no, we see Tom Holland make not just mistakes that are plot important, which you can kind of say, okay, yeah, that's fine. This is the way that the film is structured. But he makes even more idiotic decisions than that. He doubles and triples down on the opening mistake and creates the situation that he then has to fix. And it's sort of like, okay, now I'm going to be responsible at the very end, having created this entire mess and gotten people killed. And I'm just looking at this like, why do you want me to root for this character? And I will say, there's a lot about this movie in general that I like. I like the three Peters interacting. I like, they're truly trying to make this a fan pleaser movie with all of the elements that we like. The Daredevil cameo, bringing in Doctor Strange, bringing in the three Peters, bringing in all the classic villains from the other films. All of these are designed to build goodwill, and we have seen in previous films that if you can build goodwill, that can overcome logical problems with a movie. We talked about that with Aliens. But at the same time, can I overlook the fact that they completely made the main character unlikable, completely unlikable, and overlook that because of member berries and, goodwill that's built all over the course of the film? I'm not sure that I can. That it just completely damages this movie to me to such an extent that I don't know that I even want to watch a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie anymore.
Okay, Steve said a mouthful there, and I'm going to use that to springboard into where we're going. Now, he's tapped into something.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am. You had something to add?
Yeah, I just listening to Steve, it occurred to me that the reason that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has become so unlikable in this movie, even more so, is because for whatever reason, the writers decided to use May as social conscious in this movie and completely divert Parker, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, from any sensible, heroic path that he was on. And so he becomes an idiot in this movie, all because of May. She is the voice in his head, causing him to do stupid things throughout the whole movie. And then we get her final scene as well. So,
okay. So Steve tapped into something that we need to talk about now since he brought it up. And that is that if you notice, there's been, because as he said it, I realized that applies to CW's Oliver Queen, that applies to Barry Allen, that applies to Jean-Luc Picard, he was literally unrecognizable in a show with his name on it. And that is that we have gone on either the white men bad tour or the men bad stupid tour or the men self-hating tour. And it all started with Smallville. I try to tell people you cannot have a Clark Kent that goes kicking and screaming into the cape. You cannot have a Clark Kent that is so reluctant and so his destiny seems so repugnant to him. That's not Superman. Okay, even with Burns' reboot in the comics, Clark flew into action in plain clothes because he couldn't stand by let people get hurt. And then that's where the costume comes in. It's like, you can't do that all the time. Clark was like, I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. But on Smallville, from the pilot, that Clark is self-hating. That Clark does not want to be who he is. That Clark has no sense of the wider responsibility to the world around him. He just wants Lana. So they made him small. So then they take the next step with Oliver Queen and Barry Allen, and they make them self-hating and incompetent and unable to make a decision without Felicity and Iris. This culminates in what Steve was talking about and what Nims is talking about here, in making Peter be so inept in almost everything he does that he's either got to listen to May or Zendaya or MJ, or I refuse to call her anything that sounds like Mary Jane, because that girl ain't Mary Jane. But he's got these voices in his head because he has no decision-making ability. He has no discernment to say, is this right or wrong? What's the bigger picture here? And so we've seen a devolving curve for the men, for our heroes, that's been going on for over 20 years now, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And if you're a writer, you know that writing is catharsis. So we now have people scripting these heroes that hate them. Maybe they hate men, maybe they hate white men, maybe they hate we know they hate us. We know they hate the fans. They make that clear all the time that they hate us. But this has been a thing. And then we get over into Ray and Finn and Luke. This has been a thing. So it really kind of hits ahead in this movie, because I never thought I'd see a Peter that was just so deeply unlikable, you just want to punch him. And this movie solidified that Toby is my favorite for all the reasons that Steve mentioned. But I'm like, I'm not supposed to not like you. I've always liked you. Okay? And part of the brilliance of Spider-Man that they keep struggling with, people keep saying, many times race swap characters don't work, but the big exceptions are Nick Fury and Miles Morales. People say, why does Miles Morales work? I'll tell you why he works. Because Spider-Man was born at 15 years of age. And whatever a character is created in, that spirit tends to stay on it over the life of the character. Meaning that it's just something fun about getting powers as a sophomore in high school and dealing with everything that comes along with that. That story is evergreen. That story is always fun. Okay. And that's one of the appeals of Spider-Man. But if you follow Spider-Man, we can handle a Spider-Man at 25. We can handle a married Spider-Man. We can handle an adult professor. So he really kind of stretches between that 15-year period, between 15 and 30, Peter can have any stage of life there, and the characters still work.
He works as a dad.
Right, he works as a dad. But here, he has, and they did the same thing to Tony Stark, I'm sad to say. He has regressed. By the time he shows up in this movie, he's thinking worse than he should be thinking. His thinking is smaller. His thinking is not even that of an adolescent that's had the experiences of working with the Avengers, of going through the blip, of being in space, of facing off against Thanos.
Yeah, that was exactly my point. Like, he wouldn't be making these kinds of boneheaded decisions.
Because that would have an impact on you, and it would change your life the way it changed Tony's life. The reason Tony went through what he went through, at least in story, which I don't buy, but it's because the world opened up and a hole opened up in space, and there were aliens there, and they would have taken us out had Tony not made a sacrifice if there had been no Avengers. That's the premise of him freaking out in Age of Ultron and creating Ultron.
I think I disagree with you a little bit, DT.
Go ahead.
I think that this Peter, I agree with you that they made him inept and everything, but I think that they have taken away his responsibility. It's a tagline. It's iconic. With great power comes great responsibility. But part of having that great power and that great responsibility is taking responsibility for the consequences of the things that happen. And May is, in his head trying to tell him that he can make everything better. And it's the same problem that Tony had through his entire arc. Tony, can you imagine that version of Tony Stark being on the Illuminati? He can't take responsibility for anything, with the fact that if A happens, then I need to accept that I may have to deal with bad, event B and C happening for the greater good. That's the whole point of the Illuminati. They do some horrible things sometimes for the greater good, and they take responsibility for it. And it's the same thing with Peter here. May's telling him that he can fix everything, that he could do X, Y, and Z, and that everything will be sunshine and rainbows and roses. And that's kind of been Peter's arc as well, as he grows up as a hero from 15-year-old to a 30-year-old, as he realizes, just like other heroes, like Superman. I'm sure Superman would love to zoom around the world and save every single person all the time. But he would have to take responsibility for that. He would infantilize humanity. So he doesn't. So with great power comes great responsibility. Superman can't be there all the time. Otherwise, people would be dependent on him all the time. It's the same thing with Peter. And eventually, you would hope that this version of Tom Holland's Parker learns that at the end. But I'm not hopeful because I don't see that the writers have.
He didn't even learn from what happened in Far From Home, which was also his fault.
Yeah. So it's like.
But I don't think we're saying different things.
No, I think you're right. It's just they're taking their agency away. That's what these writers are taking. They're taking the agency away because all of these heroes, even Batman, as much as he's out there stopping crime all the time, he doesn't stop all the crime. It's possible Batman could become. There are versions of Batman that become an autocrat, that go out there and build. They become a fascist. And I think the main version of Batman doesn't do that because he realizes the consequences. So even though he has the power, he takes responsibility that some people are going to die in order for Gotham to be somewhat free. So
okay, but two things. I don't think we're disagreeing, but the problem is what Steve said. The problem is that this character was born in the idea of taking responsibility. This character was born you're a sophomore in high school at 15. And this character was born in brokenness, realizing that it was my small-mindedness that cost me the most important man in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Parker has powers because he got bitten by a radioactive spider. Peter Parker is a hero because Uncle Ben died and it was his fault. Spider-Man was a wrestler. Spider wanted fame, fortune, and women. And then that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized it's my fault. There are bigger things in this world than seeking pleasures, and I should have done something. So I can't live my life not doing something. 15 years old. I want you to think about if there's drunk driving and a bunch of kids are fooling around and underage drinking, and there's a crash and somebody gets crippled, and then now they're in a wheelchair for the rest of their life, or somebody dies. You would expect that young person to understand the gravity of what just happened because of your foolishness. You're not supposed to be drinking anyway, but now somebody's crippled or dead because of you. So that's what I mean when I say this character in particular has the frame of understanding that as a sophomore in high school, along with the scientific genius. So when you write him to do what he did in this movie, you have to ask yourself, who is that? That's not who. That's number one. Number two, and then I'm gonna get into the details of the movie. The second thing is that it's why I hated the end of The Dark Knight so much. I know people, still worship that movie and they say it's up there with Mask of the Phantasm, blah, 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 blah. But Batman taking responsibility for what Dent did and what the Joker did and let him hate me and let him chase me, still to this day, just rubs me wrong because it's so stupid. Batman wouldn't do that because there's no need to do that. Okay. And it didn't make anything better. And they ended up having to tell the truth anyway. That's why it's always better to tell the truth from the jump because truth gonna come out later. So what I'm saying is applying that to this movie, when you have heroes do things that are just so, they're not just stupid for the hero, they just stupid. It's hard to like people like that because heroes are supposed to be better than us. Having said that, John Truby teaches in his book and his teachings that stories rise or fall based on the premise. And he said, most authors fail at the premise line. They do not know how to examine their premises and mine the gold and get a strong enough premise to actually build a story. And if the premise is not right, if the premise fails, then there's nothing you can do on top. There's no amount of smoke and mirrors and explosions and member berries and cameos that you can do if the premise is wrong. Okay? The premise of this film is that, and this is what really makes me mad, so I'm gonna try to stay calm, is not just Peter, it's Doctor Strange. Absolutely no way you could get to the level of the Sorcerer Supreme and be that stupid to grant the genie-like wish of a boy that's freaking out because his friends can't get in college, okay? And that you would risk the fabric of reality, especially after Endgame. He went through all the possible combinations of the future and said the only way we win is for it to happen this way. So even if he doesn't have the eye anymore, even he doesn't have the time stone or the reality stone or whatever, he had the experience. And here comes some kid who's freaking out because his identity got exposed because maybe he never considered that could happen. But now that it's happened, his argument is my friends can't get into school they wanted, so why don't you just change reality and fix all that? The very fact that Doctor Strange even entertained that notion threw me out of the film. I was like, yeah, no. Nope.
And you can and the thing of it is he can solve it in 5 minutes. Just say, okay, I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation. Yeah, I know these people at this school. I can get you an indoor to that. Don't worry about it. The end. Directed by John Watts. Yeah.
I'm a world famous neurosurgeon. I've got some pull.
That's right. That's right.
And I think they compounded the problem with, okay, he makes that mistake. He does that. But then Peter gets away and takes that box of, of whatever the stuff was, the box of troubles with him. And I'm like, okay, look,
Pandora.
I understand that Spider-Man has popularity power here. He's got a popularity overload of power, but Doctor Strange is on a whole other level of power compared to Spider-Man. Doctor Strange should be able to flick his little finger, and Peter is just stuck doing nothing. And he just takes the box.
Okay, we're going to get that because that whole thing where he punks Doctor Strange, that's another. I'm like, nope.
Doctor Strange did not have the awesome power of plot armor, though.
I don't remember what animated show was from where the member bears were talking. Member. What show was that from?
South Park.
South Park. Okay. Yeah, I don't watch South Park, so that's why I didn't know that. Member bears is when they're trying to fool you they're trying to cover their bad writing and they're trying to cover their thin plot with throwing something on the screen that you remember from another episode or another season, and so you get the good feelings because I'm remembering something I enjoyed to cover up for the fact that what's happening now is lame. That's a memorable.
For me, it's a bit backfires usually because when they do that, it just reminds me of things I could be saying instead of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the premise of this film is that, see, now, and the other thing that, see, because I've talked about this on Twitter, again, almost daily. Can you guys please Scooby-Doo that?
If only.
Oh, God. I cannot tell you how much I hate that line coming out of the mouth of a famous neurosurgeon who happens to be Dr. Strange.
And that's the censored version. The uncensored version I really didn't see coming out of Strange's mouth.
Yeah.
So one of the things, again, these are perennial Twitter conversations now. I need to just put some stuff on auto post and just like post every couple of weeks because I keep having to deal with the same things. And that is that when you're dealing with something like this, when you're dealing with something like identity being exposed, we know from Civil War, and we know the overall point I'm trying to make here is that you can't mush the real world and the fantasy world and just take some of either. You kind of have to go one way or the other. And if Spider-Man was exposed, everybody would have been dead. He wouldn't have been able to go to school. It wouldn't have been people holding up their phones. It would have been a whole bunch of real problems flooding in, which is why he had to try to get his solution in the comics. But I'm saying it would have been his enemies coming out of the woodwork. It wouldn't be walking like a hall of shame to going to high school because everybody knows you. That is another thing that just made me so mad because it's vapid.
It would have been the trial lawyers coming for him. So.
Like the school wouldn't even let him in. I mean, like
right.
Can you imagine a high school go like, "Hey, like really dangerous people try to kill you all the time. Don't come here, please."
Right,
Yeah.
and
You can be homeschooled.
Yeah.
Be Spider homeschool, and then there is the real life issue of property damage.
Yeah,
because the Fantastic Four have to deal with that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the premise of Civil War, where Thunderbolt Ross comes in and unfairly blames the Avengers for collateral damage because it actually wasn't their fault, except that thing with Wanda that was her fault.
Now that you mentioned Thunderbolt Ross, rest in peace, William Hurt, who passed away this week.
William Hurt, absolutely. And that's the other thing. Once again, if you want to look at another example of people being completely unmoored from moral underpinnings, is the end of WandaVision, because Wanda Maximoff did terrible things that made me so mad I couldn't believe it, and just flew away.
Yeah, gets a big pass.
And Monica Rambeau talking about they'll never know what you gave up for them. What? You captured a town full of people and hypnotize them for your grief?
Well, at least it looks like she's going to be a proper villain come Doctor Strange, but we'll see.
I'm not holding my breath on that.
Yeah, me either. But I suppose, I don't like not liking my heroes. I really don't. So the basic premise here, like I said, is so wrong from so many different angles. And then the execution where, again, he's casting the spell. And Peter says, what about this and what about that? I would have slapped that boy out there. I'm like, you don't get out my face. I'm trying to cast a spell, a delicate spell, something that's changing the fabric of reality. And here you come with your little humorous, interruptions and all this. And you clearly don't understand what's going on. And it's like, if you're cooking and you got things, on the stove, you have small children, you have to tell them, baby, you can't get near the stove now while I'm cooking. If that makes you mad, then be mad. I'm going to pick you up and go in there and you play in your room. This is fire. This is boiling water. It's a whole bunch of stuff dangerous. You can't be around this. Okay. That's what an adult would say. The Sorcerer Supreme wouldn't have entertained it. But even if he did do it, it would have been like, would you get out my face while I'm trying to cast a spell? But instead, he goes through with it. And then the thing goes wrong. And then the bookend of that, at the end of the movie, like Mims was talking about him getting responsible, we'll get there. But the bookend is when you see the reality bubbles, the reality pockets opening. We saw the reality pockets open to let the villains in, but then it started opening, all over the place. When you're, and it's the monkey's paw kind of thing. Like, you do something, but you don't understand the cost of it, or you make a wish, but because of the way you worded it, it always gets taken the worst way. That kind of thing. That's good for a fable. That's good for a children's tale. That's good for something like that. But Doctor Strange would know better. All you have to do is watch the What If episode where he becomes Evil Strange. Okay, and then Evil Strange shows up in Multiverse of Madness, but when you watch the What If episode, you understand where he comes from. So all I'm saying is both of them were so uncharacteristic. And the basic premise is that Peter is freaking out and he wants to change reality, and Doctor Strange says, okay, and then it's like he drops a bucket of popcorn while he's casting the spell. And I'm like, could y'all be any more stupid? I'm just trying to understand the level of stupidity that's going on in this room. And it knocked me right out the film. You know how when Doctor Strange hits you and he knocks your soul out your back? It knocked me out the film. I was just like that. I was like, no. So I want to hear you guys' comments on the basic premise of this film. What do you think about the idea of Peter's convenient consequences from being outed in terms of identity, his ridiculous idea of changing reality because the friends can't get into college, and Doctor Strange going along with it all? Okay, start with Steve.
None of this makes any sense. That's my opening salvo. None of this makes any sense. I mean, everything and when once again we get back to the idea that Peter is the author of his own misfortunes. You know, he sets himself up for these problems, and it just balloons and balloons and balloons, and he gets other people involved and making dumber mistakes, and they keep compounding, and it's ever been since Far From Home. You know, it's like, okay, well, yeah, he takes off his mask. Well, yeah, a lot of this is because where are all of his problems from? Because he trusted Mysterio. He told Mysterio he was. He gave Mysterio access to the tech that he abused, creating the whole situation, which he hadn't had to go and fix. And then he gets outed because of this. So this is Peter's fault. And on top, so, you know, he's absolutely responsible for everything that, you know, happens to MJ or Michelle, I guess I'll call her, Michelle and Ned. You know, so all of that is his fault, you know. And then it's like, oh, well, I realized I was wrong. I have to go fix this. I'm going to go and ask Strange to cast a magic spell for me. And it's just like, you're the guy that's supposed to be about with great power comes great responsibility. And your whole thing is you want to ask this guy and pull favors so he can abuse his power to help you figure out a situation you probably could figure out on your own with a little bit of help and getting some people to do reasonable things for you. You know, and again, just the idea that he could ask Strange, who is a neurosurgeon and probably knows tons of people and involved in various universities, he could probably get a free ride just on a letter of recommendation from Stephen Strange. And you know, he's going to ask, oh, why don't you rewrite reality in order to do this? No. And again, Strange would not do that either. And certainly Strange would not be, you know, so foolhardy as to say, yeah, I'm just going to go and blindly cast it without thinking, do you want any exceptions to that rule? You know, are you sure about this? You know, are you sure that there are not going to be any other people that you want to know your identity before we start, Peter? No, none of that. So on top of that, Strange ends up looking stupid. In addition to Peter end up looking stupid. And then everything just snowballs from there. And then on top of that, he makes, you know, compounds this decision to go along with that by, you know, not sending the villains back and trying to stop Strange from doing what he should be doing, which is his job as, you know, protector of the multiverse. You know, he stops to do that. And then on top of that, he makes the bigger decision, you know, involving the villains that ends up leading to people being killed. You know, so it is a snowball of bad decision after bad decision over the course of 2 movies, not 1, 2 movies, that leads him into the situation that he's in. And none of it is what Peter Parker should be about, you know, because he should know better. It's like, yeah,
true.
He has a really good one. That opens up another issue. Which is, at one point, Peter goes and says, oh, I need to get some help because I can't do this on my own. Does he get the really good lawyer that he knows can stop a rock, even though he's supposed to be blind? Wouldn't that ask him some questions about who this guy is? Gee, maybe that would be a guy I would like to help me catch some of these supervillains.
Maybe grab some of the grab some of the Avengers. He kind of knows
Grab
them.
some of the Avengers. Grab anybody. Grab anybody that he happens to know. No.
Scooby Gang.
I'm gonna get Michelle and Ned, who can help me by being targets, by staying in the background and making quippy lines. No, it's ridiculous. And all of this is just designed, so that to create the situation that Peter has to then fix. And this has been the case for 2 films. And it's just, this whole formula does not work. And they need to find a different way of doing these kinds of stories. If they're going to make him make mistakes, he needs to not be this inept about it. He needs to not be this unlikable about it and not be this irresponsible about it. And then not having people that should be responsible, not do the right thing and stop him from doing these terrible things. It's just, there are no words. Really, there are none.
Okay, you touched, before I throw it to Bracy, you touched on the infection of the posse premise, that every hero has to have a little group around him, somebody in a chair, and some female correcting him all the time, and his little team, or else he's nothing. Okay?
Team Flash.
That hit his peak with Arrow, because Oliver got to the point where he was making no decisions without asking Felicity. So we was like, can you go to the bathroom? You got to ask your mama, can you go to the bathroom right now? And Flash as well. If you know anything, Barry Allen made his costume from the comics. He made the ring with the compressed air. He modeled it after Jay Garrick, the original Flash, from a comic book. And the original premise of most of these male heroes is that they created their own gear and they created their own tech. And that's never been more true than with someone like Peter, but they turned Peter in the movies into Iron Spider, into Stark Jr. And so this whole thing, and I'm like, if your concern is for your friends, like Steve said, they're targets as long as they're around you, dude. If people know that they know you, what do you think would happen? I was like, no. All right, Bracy, what do you think about the premise? Peter coming up with this idea and Strange going along with it.
Yeah, this movie didn't just break Spider-Man. It also broke Doctor Strange. Because, as Nemesis and Steve have pointed out, Doctor Strange is not being very responsible here. As a matter of fact, he's not even the Sorcerer Supreme. Wong is, and Wong seems to be doing a much better job than Doctor Strange. The only mistake that Wong makes is letting Steve get away with it. He shouldn't have, because he's the Sorcerer Supreme. As a matter of fact, somebody must have realized that when they first cut the trailer. Wong actually admonishes him in the trailer, "Don't cast that spell, Strange." Right. And he's like, "Okay, Wong, you're right." And then he winks to Peter, because that's what this is. Wong, they changed it for the movie. They didn't use that particular cut of the scene. And Wong just washes his hands of it, because I guess from the Doctor Strange film, he knows that Strange is just going to do whatever he wants to anyway. But that shouldn't matter, because now he's the Sorcerer Supreme. He should have the power and ability to shut Strange down. So there's that. And the fact that Steven even goes along with it, that he keeps entertaining Peter's constant changing of the spell. Like, no, kid, this is the spell. This is how it is. Sorry, that's just how magic works. But he lets it get totally screwed up. So, there comes a point when Zendaya blames him for the spell going wrong, even after he just told her, like, yeah, your boyfriend here blew the spell. But she's not entirely wrong, even though I hate that scene. I hate her being that stupid millennial, like, you're like, I'm snarky and I'm smarter than you. Like, no, get out of my face with all that. And that's I'm sure we'll get into her at some point, because like half the time I like her and the other half the time I'm like, oh, she's being that girl again. Get out of here. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's a MacGuffin. It's a way to move the plot forward. Apparently they couldn't think of a better way. The through line that they used to have in these movies under Kevin Feige has kind of gone out the window. Feige used to be really good at like putting things together and working with directors like the Russos and like keeping a sort of continuity that you see pay off. There's things that pay off in Endgame that have been going on all the way back to the very first MCU movie.
That's right.
And that's not happening anymore. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but that's not happening. It's all over the place. It's an editorial problem, if you will. So there's that. And when we get to Spider-Man, of course, we've already addressed all the problems. Like, Peter's had more than enough experience not to do this. He's been to space. He's been blipped. He's seen the end of the world and the rebirth of the world, if you will. He's had major experiences, which you cannot excuse him being a dumb kid anymore. The original Spider-Man creation, it makes sense. He was a 15-year-old who felt mistreated by his peers. He was dealing with the loss of his parents. He had aged guardians. The only thing he had going for him is he was smart. And looking back in some of those old comics, his friends didn't even treat him that bad. They're like, "Oh, look, puny Parker," but they'll even say, "Hey, we're going down to the beach. You want to come and hang out?" Like, "No, I don't really like you guys because you make fun of me." So, like, a lot of that was on him. He carried a lot of personal angst. And so when he becomes Spider-Man, he trips out on this power fantasy for a while until it costs him. So that kid had an excuse, not a valid one, but he had an excuse to act the way he did, because he suddenly went from zero to hero. He had power, he had authority, he had all these advantages, and he abused it and paid for it. This Spider-Man does not have that at all. And you rightly named him Iron Spider, because this is not Spider-Man. This is not 616 Peter Parker Spider-Man. And part of the reasons he makes these decisions, on top of the ignoring everything else he's gone through, because he wasn't responsible for the death of Uncle Ben. They want to carry that on to here. This guy doesn't start out. He doesn't start his career with responsibility. Iron Spider starts his career, I've got these cool powers. There are all these superheroes in the world. I'm going to do what they do. I think that's fun. I think it's exciting. And, I am kind of a good kid at heart, so I'm going to go out and do the right thing. So, but part of it's the thrill. He's not really doing it out of the sense of responsibility. So he doesn't have the major thing that drives Spider-Man. It's like if they did a what if of like if and now what if Elseworlds kind of thing, like Batman was able to save his parents. Now he goes back to his own universe, but in the universe where Batman went into that universe and saved Thomas and Martha Wayne, that young Bruce Wayne grows up to still be a Batman. He's inspired by the vigilante who came and saved his parents from Joe Chill, but he is not the wounded, damaged, brooding man who will never be completely satisfied, who is driven by a sense of justice and vengeance. He's not going to be that guy. He's going to be a superhero, true. He's going to be a Batman, but he's not the Batman.
Right.
And so this is not the Spider-Man, and because he's not the Spider-Man, he makes the worst possible mistakes. And it's really disappointing, because I do like Tom Holland. When he's on point as Peter and as Spider-Man, he's very enjoyable to watch. He's got a lot of that. He's very good. His comic timing is good. A lot of this is good, but the writing doesn't do him any favors here. It doesn't do the character any favors. And as I was mentioning in a tweet on an unrelated subject, when these characters have 50, 60, 70, 80 years of history, I, as a creator, respect that. And if you do dumb things with the characters, you're doing a disservice to the characters and to the fans of those characters. But they figured, only 200,000 people or so read comics anyway. So, let's do this for the normies.
Well, I like your statement of this may be Spider-Man, but it's not the Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very encapsulatory in terms of what happens here. All right, Nims, thoughts about the very premise of this film, Peter and Strange going along with it, which I still can't believe. Even when I say it, I still can't believe.
I mean, honestly, Andrew Garfield and Toby, they're more Spider-Man than this Spider-Man.
Yep.
I'm going to expand a little bit on what Jeff hit on, because I agree with what he was saying 1,000%. Is that the problem is that this movie was made in order to make other movies. And yes, absolutely. Yes. We agree. We want hashtag keep your damn mask on to trend, because all of the superheroes need to keep their masks on. And Thanks, Adam. Yeah, this movie is a collection of fan service and then a vehicle to get to other movies. And it's a vehicle to get Disney purchases of intellectual property in the real world into this universe that they've created. And that's one of the problems. The other problem is that, everyone likes to make fun of WB and the DCU because they did these movies that are separated from each other to a certain extent. And MCU, to its credit, for a long time, followed one continuous storyline, one continuous world. Well, what that means is, we were talking about great power comes great responsibility. Well, great power in Feige's hands means you need responsibility to continuing, and having continuity between films. And they've completely abdicated that responsibility at this point. And they've abdicated this world, responsibility for this world that they've created, which goes right into what we're talking about here with Spider-Man and the consequences for what he's done. And, there are earlier instances where we've seen these consequences. When Tony Stark in the very first Iron Man film comes out at the end, because he can't keep his mouth shut and says, I am Iron Man, there are consequences. Stock prices drop. People start coming for him. He's got a target on his head. He gets responsible. S.H.I.E.L.D. comes his way and wants it to work. I mean, there's a whole host of things that happen. And even with Doctor Strange has become a shadow of himself. In the first Doctor Strange movie, he has responsibility. He goes out there and lets himself be tortured by Dormammu over and over and over again until he finds the one instance where he defeats Dormammu. So Doctor Strange is acting like Doctor Strange in the first one. But in order to, fit in this new whatever it is they want to do, this new world, these new movies, and these new characters who have no responsibility, they've shattered the characters who came before. I mean, I never really I don't like Tony Stark as a character in the comics. I really didn't like Tony Stark as a character in the MCU because I think he was a jackass. Excuse my language. He's a narcissistic jackass. And I can't see that he would ever be in the Illuminati or responsible for anything because the man can't see past his own hubris. But he was consistent, at least. Now no character is consistent because they have to fit into whatever they want to sell, whatever new intellectual property they want to fit in, whatever.
Right.
So this leads right into the consequences here. So, I mean, we've already touched on it a little bit. The minute Spider-Man's identity becomes public, he's got a whole host of troubles. I mean, like I mentioned before, the biggest problem he's going to have is absolutely, Stuart. The biggest problem he's going to have is the trial lawyers. The trial lawyers are going to come for him. And he's not a billionaire philanthropist playboy. So he doesn't have an army of lawyers protecting him. And I don't care how good Matt Murdock is. Matt Murdock is going to get eaten up by the sharks that are out there trying to get money, any way they can out of him and their pound of flesh. That's the first thing that's going to happen. And that sounds like it's not a great movie. And I agree with you. That wouldn't be a great movie to see, which is why you don't make his identity come out. Because if you're going to keep the world consistent, then you need to keep the world consistent. And that's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened would be that congressional hearings would be, how exactly did you become Spider-Man? Excuse me, Peter Parker, we'd like to take some blood and see if we can replicate this for our own super soldier program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Clone Saga.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of things that would happen. And then, that goes then into what I was talking about with Doctor Strange. With Doctor Strange's casting this spell, you've already seen that Doctor Strange in earlier movies takes responsibility for the world. He is a man who is incredibly intellectual. The first Doctor Strange in the Doctor Strange movie, I could see being on the Illuminati. This one, I couldn't see him driving a Prius down the road without crashing it and blowing everything up. And, the original Doctor Strange, when Peter is complaining about this, that, or some other thing, would turn around and say, shut your mouth, or I'm going to pull the spell over to the side of the road and we're going to have, some words, and instead he's entertaining all these things. And the fact of the matter is that Strange could have cast a spell, done everything he needed to do, and then just fixed it either, like Steve was saying, with a letter, or fixed it with his own magic. It would have been like, okay, well, here, I'll just magic this up and you can get into college, whatever, and the movie is over in 20 minutes. So it really makes no logical, consistent sense. And I know we're going to get into some other stuff that happened after that. But really, it all boils down to this movie has no plot line. It is a vehicle to get to Multiverse of Madness, which is a vehicle to get to the next phase of the MCU.
Yep.
And if this is the way they're going to treat stuff, then it's going to be a failure. And I have to say, this is anecdotal, but this is from my kids. My kids have loved the first phase of the MCU. We've got Disney Plus, and they've watched the stuff, and they're not interested anymore. They said it's boring and doesn't make any sense. So, they don't like the Hawkeye. They saw Miss Marvel and cringed. All of that. So I think Disney needs to really take a step back and examine stuff. And I think they need to put someone in charge. It's not going to be Feige if Feige's too busy going to Malibu parties and being Tony Stark in real life. Somebody needs to get in there and coordinate what's going on with the stories.
I offer my services.
The same thing. That's right. I was thinking about protecting his identity. That's right, because just with a potato gun. because Aunt May and Mary Jane are going to get a bullet to the head the moment you do this and say, I'm Peter Parker, and I've been Spider-Man since I was 15. Everybody coming for you then.
Yeah.
So, but with this film, once again, that lack of consequences, that lack of responsibility for Strange, when you have two characters that are rooted in taking responsibility, that's why they are who they are. So, like I said, right from the premise, I was like, And
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to say, I keep mentioning Illuminati, but I think that's really important because they're introducing the concept of the Illuminati. And it's like, I'm going to be really upset if the new MCU introduces the concept of the Illuminati and the Illuminati is not doing Illuminati type things, because Illuminati is not a group that you always want to root for. They're the group that does the necessary evil. And decades later, you'll look back and go, yeah, that sucked what they did, but I guess they had to do it, And
that sounds a little bit like the operative from Serenity. Not quite that extreme, but the same concept.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you guys know, being military, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And sometimes it's a greater good. And the cost is personal. Sometimes you're throwing yourself out there, but other people are going to live because of your sacrifice.
Yeah.
That part we can get.
For goodness sakes, Namor is on the Illuminati. So
this is carelessness. Now, for those of you that might not know what the Illuminati is, basically it's a group of Marvel characters who got together because they were the most brilliant and the most powerful, but mainly more so the mind. And they realized, especially in dealing with the Hulk, that there are global problems that we need to be proactive about instead of reactive about. In the comics, that included Black Panther, Namor, Iron Man, Reed Richards, Doctor Strange, and Charles Xavier. In the comics, that makes all the sense in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That makes all the sense in the world. But these screen versions, we're just left scratching our head.
Oh, and Black Bolt, although we don't have him in the MCU, really.
And Black Bolt. But we can't get the Inhumans we've seen. Not that Black Bolt. That's quarter Black Bolt. But anyway, let me recommend, if you haven't watched, if you don't know who Az is from Heel versus Babyface, he's got a video out now that describes exactly what's been going on, and that is the MCU bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
We have the male character that's going to be completely supplanted by the female characters that's going to be better than him in every way, and it's really her show, but it's disguised as his show to get you to watch. That's Hawkeye, that's you name it. That's definitely the Flash. Now, I know that's not the MCU, but I'm talking about the idea has permeated the superhero sphere, where we're going to hook you with the male character, then we're going to completely bash him, and it's going to be the female character that's going to replace him because he's just stupid. But anyway, so that leads me to the next part. Now, this was one of the few parts, I'll go so far as to say this is what I enjoyed about this movie the most, and that is the villains, with some asterisks and caveats. But generally speaking, they were the best part of this film for a bunch of different reasons, which my co-hosts and I are going to get into. First of all, my favorite was Doc Ock, because Molina as Ock was just such a brilliant casting, and he's one of those actors where he knows how to convince you he's that person for 2 hours. Truly an actor where he disappears and you believe he's the character. Just absolutely. I've never been crazy about Dafoe as Goblin. I know people love him, but his number has never really done that much for me. That's just me. The weakest one was Jamie Foxx as Electro, because that was not Electro. That was Jamie Foxx with lightning powers.
Yeah.
And I was like, he comes in cracking snarky jokes like Jamie Foxx would, not like Electro. I'm like, I've always preferred Max Dillon anyway, and that's just me. And then the Lizard, I felt, was downplayed because they worked so hard to make Dr. Connors look crazy that you haven't seen enough of his genius. He was trying to find out the regenerative properties of, because he'd lost his left arm, and he was trying to find out if a human could grow back limbs the way lizards do, and he stumbled upon the formula, but that's what turned him into the lizard. So he's got the Jekyll and Hyde thing going on, and that's really been missing from his characterization, at least from my point of view, because he just seems kind of angry, just kind of tetchy, just kind of, I just want to make everybody a lizard, and he's much more than that as a character. So where they were going with that in the Tobey Maguire universe, now that Connor, we meet as the professor, as the intelligent one, and we could buy more of the Jekyll Hyde thing. But again, in the one we meet with Garfield and all that, I'm like, that's a little too much monster and not enough man. But I really like the characters, the villains. I really like Doc Ock in particular with Molina Zoc. I really like how they meet on the bridge and how he's like, "You're not my Peter," and I was like, "I'm so confused now." I really liked all that. But the movie takes a downturn, and Nemesis has already hit on it. When they go to Happy's apartment, I was like, I just boop, boop, boop. I just boop, boop. Just knocked me back again on my body. I said, "What did you say? You're gonna take the almost Sinister Six, and you're gonna put so I can't even finish the sentence. That's so stupid." And I'm like, "You're gonna expose somebody like Norman Osborn, even though he did a really good job of the dual identity thing and fooled me. But excuse me. Now I'm gonna say this. I've been saying this for I don't know how many years, and I will keep saying it. I'm so tired of selective spider sense. There's this big scene where Peter comes out, and all of a sudden it's like he's sniffing around the room, like ruh-roh, and he's something wrong here, and then you're evil now. And I was like, really? You couldn't smell that when he was acting before? Okay, you couldn't tell that he was acting before. You just didn't smell none of that. Just no spidey sense. And I'm like, and you're gonna let people see your codes, and you're gonna let people see all this technology, and you're gonna give people access to Avengers level secrets. Now, I don't know if you follow some news stories, but there have been some generals in the Army that have wrecked their careers because they allowed classified information to be exposed to civilians. This is not quite that level, but it's the same idea, that anybody involved with the Avengers should have more sense than to bring the almost Sinister Six into anybody that's got a connection to that type of information or tech or whatever have you. So I'm saying that's when the goodness of the characterization of the villains takes a sour turn for me, because I'm like, none of y'all could see somebody going bad and betraying the group. None of y'all could see something bad possibly happen. And it's what Nemesis said. May is almost a caricature. And I was screaming at the screen that everything you say is wrong, baby. Everything you say is wrong. I don't even understand why they wrote you that way, because May in the comics was never hot May. So there's that. But May in the comics always helped nurse Peter back to health. And May in the comics was Peter's grounding force after Uncle Ben dies.
May is the real villain of this film.
The film, right. But in the comics, every time Peter begins to lose his way on any level, he reconnects with Aunt May, and she has to pretend that she doesn't know he's Spider-Man. In some, timelines or incarnations she does, some she doesn't. But she's always, like in the Maguire films, giving him a word of wisdom to ground him again and make him realize who he is and what the right thing to do is. They flipped that whole script in this movie, and they made May somebody she totally isn't. And so again, I enjoyed the villains. I enjoyed how they come through. I still think it's funny the way the spell was worded, that you get them, and then you get Peter, and then you get May. And then you get Everybody knows the Peter Parker Spider-Man are okay, but bamfing them, teleporting them into their little plastic shield prisons reminded me a lot of the Flash pipeline, because how they gonna go to the bathroom? I'm just asking a question. And then, I'm like, y'all haven't figured out yet that if you don't gag or muscle villains, they just gonna get in your head. That's what they do. Okay? That's what they do. That's all they do. They just gonna keep talking until they get you riled up and you do something stupid, and whoop, now they've escaped and blah, blah, blah. Because nobody in a superhero movie has ever seen a superhero movie. So I'm like, okay, this started out good, but it takes that sour turn. So it was good up until we get to Happy's apartment, that whole thing. But I did, again, love the characterizations. Oh, Sandman. I know I was forgetting somebody. Sandman was there too, which shows you how ineffective he was, because I forgot he was there. But, if you, once again, if they would bother to read a comic, if you know anything about the Sinister Six actually is the group that gives a testimony to how powerful Spider-Man really is and how much Peter Parker actually holds back. The same way Superman holds back, because 6 of his greatest villains teamed up and said we ought to be able to take him down, and Peter beat him every time. Sometimes he beat him by, the chinny chin chin method, but he still beat him because he outthought him and he outfought him. But that is not what happened here. He just said, well, I'm just going to lay down and let y'all have a run in the place. Go ahead on, help me with a solution. Can we come up with a solution? Everybody's good. We're all friends, right? I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus, help me. So anyway, I want to hear your thoughts about the villains. Start with Bracy.
Oh, yeah. Man, I was really hoping this was going to be the Sinister Six. When it started leaking that the other Spider-Men were going to be in here, as well as the villains from the other movies, I thought this would be great. As you rightly said, each of these guys has really put Spider-Man through his paces in the comics. They've all been a challenge to him, but it's like you said, it's because Spider-Man always holds back. And even Andrew Garfield, he mentions a line that Spider-Man has mentioned in the comics multiple times. I am pulling my punches. Mm-hmm. And like, there are times when Spider-Man like loses his cool, and he'll say things like, okay, I'm pulling my punches just barely. He's on the verge of killing somebody because like something really horrible's happened, and he's on the edge of snapping. And when we see Doc Ock in the Superior Spider-Man take over Peter's body, and he takes on the Sinister Six, what does he do? He knocks the flipping Scorpion's jaw off his face. That's what Spider-Man can do when he cuts loose. Just like when we see, like in Justice, when Superman cuts loose, he rules the world. Mm-hmm. This is what happens. Some characters are just that powerful if they're not restrained by their morals. So I wanted to see Spider-Man really having to go out. The closest I feel like we've gotten to see that was in the previous film, where Spider-Man had to dodge all the drones to get to Mysterio. I felt like I was seeing peak Spider-Man right there. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping to see that again, but in context of dealing with a whole bunch of supervillains. Now, we didn't actually have 6 here, which was disappointing. I actually thought if you're going to bring Peter's villains back to life and people who know who Peter is, why not bring Mysterio back to life as well? Then we would have had the 6. And we would all have...
bring in the Vulture.
That's what I thought was going to happen. Either Mysterio was coming back.
Yeah, Mysterio or the Vulture. So we've got the potential right there. So we've got either one of those characters. And that's what I was looking forward to, because they're all people who know who Spider-Man is in the context of these movies. Excuse me. I do think Molina is perfect casting as Doc Ock. He's so on point as the character. And I know people say, the Green Goblin's his arch nemesis. It's his Joker to his Batman. But really, the character who reflects Peter the most is actually Dr. Octopus. He's that nerdy scientist, that guy who's, he's not athletic. He's kind of a schlub, but he gains power, and the power allows him to achieve the full potential of his mind and his physicality and everything. And he really is Peter's opposite number in so many ways. And it's kind of funny because, with the extra arms, he's even like a spider, even though he's Doc Ock. So he's played perfectly. I've never really liked Dafoe as the Green Goblin, and I don't think this is a Dafoe thing because it's again scripted. I don't like the split personality. Green Goblin is not a split personality. Green Goblin gets affected by his formulation so that he can physically compete with Spider-Man, but it has side effects that drives him mad. He loses impulse control. The more aggressive side of his personality takes a cedence, but it's not a Jekyll and Hyde. The real Jekyll and Hyde is the Lizard, which we never get in the movies. The Lizard hates Kurt Connors. The Lizard hates mammals. The Lizard wants to turn other people into lizards because it wants more lizards. It doesn't want mammals. It wants to rule like the dinosaurs over the squishy little mammals. So that should have been the thing that we saw there. He should have been like hissing and sort of like, warm blood, soft skins, I'll crush you all. That sort of thing. Not like, oh, I can make you better. You're like, okay, it's the beast over there. It's the beast with scales and without not fur. It's the beast. All right, that's what we got going on.
Right, not the C-3PO version of the Lizard.
Yeah, this is although I will say that I thought the remodeling that they did in the Lizard actually looked better in the Garfield films. I liked his look a lot better here. Electro, Jamie Foxx's Electro. Don't need to say anything more there. So and again, like Christopher Hayden as a Sandman was just kind of there. I don't like that characterization of the Sandman either. Like what was wrong with Flint Marko just being like a small time thug? Mm-hmm. But no, we got my daughter. We got to make every bad guy sympathy, like because everybody has to have these shades of gray. Everybody's got to have some level of sympathy, and I want villains who are humanistic. You can understand their motivations and whatnot, but they're still the villains. So no, don't give me like I got to get back to my daughter and that sort of thing. And I know Flint's got a history in the comics of having switched sides a little bit. If not being a hero, at least working with them. But the thing here, what I really wanted to see is all these guys come back, whether it's live Vulture, dead Mysterio, because some of these other characters are dead coming in this world. And they're like, oh, man, we're in this new world. We've got a second chance. But there's one commonality. The one guy who's always been a thorn in our side. There's Spider-Man. And we can't do what we all want to do. Like Osborn saying, like, if you got the power of a god, you take. We got to get rid of him first. And we have never been able to beat him on our own. So let's go ahead and form this posse. Now, this works, and then inevitably it would fall apart because villains can't trust other villains. Mm-hmm. And the Spider-Men come in and actually save Peter's hash. And they understand, like, even though like this Holland Peter has the benefit of having been on a team. And so he does get to coordinate. And like, okay, yeah, like Spider-Man is normally a solo act, but with somebody who's got that experience and they all kind of think the same and they all have the same sort of powers, and just using that spider sense just makes them just a ridiculously unstoppable force. That's what I wanted to see out of this in the villains. I did enjoy the villains for what they were. I wish they could have been more, and I'd also like to give major props to Willem Dafoe for this. He would not come back and do the film unless he could do all of his own stunts. And yes. This guy's 60 and he's running around getting smacked through walls and punching people. It's like, you go, man. Like, I'm 54 and I'm finding it hard to move. And look at this guy get it on. So yeah, even though I didn't like I don't like that iteration of the Green Goblin, and I know I don't like the Green Goblin mask, the solid mask that doesn't move, but I was like, as soon as he smashed it, I was like, keep your damn mask on. I did appreciate them putting on the purple hoodie, so he looked a little bit more like the Green Goblin OG costume, but I was like, it's not the Green Goblin without your mask, man. Even if you just smash the bottom jaw so we can see you talk better, mask. It's superhero movies. Why do we keep getting rid of the masks? I mean, I'm looking at you, Tobey Maguire, because this started in your films, like Spider-Man 3. You got to take the mask off every 2 minutes here. They got in my contract now. Show my face. Show my face. Show my face. That's what all the Peter Parker scenes are for, dude. That's what all the Peter Parker scenes are for. But yeah, it had so much promise, and it didn't deliver. Again, there were parts of it that were very enjoyable, but it could have been so much more.
That's the most disappointing thing about the film, is that you can see very easily with just a few tweaks
The
and a
potential.
few adjustments, right, the potential. Go ahead, Nims. Thoughts about the villains?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff hit on a lot of good points. I'll just real quick. I want to hit on first the look of the villains. I thought generally it was better because I think technology has gotten better to
Yeah,
a
the
certain
CGI is
extent.
definitely better.
I absolutely agree. I hated the mask on the Green Goblin, and when they got rid of the mask, I was hoping either a rubber mask or some sort of CGI thing or something would come in. That's really what I was hoping for. Didn't happen, But the purple hoodie and everything, I could handle it. But yeah, still keep your damn mask on, even though nobody knows who this Osborn is in this world, which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it does in some, I guess, it's some convoluted way. The way they're doing the Marvel or the multiverse here. The other one that I really didn't buy is Sandman. I don't understand why he's in the movie at all. He had an arc in the Tobey Maguire movies.
Mhm.
I think that his arc was completed. I don't understand, given why they brought the other villains back, how he would even qualify to come back. So it just didn't make sense to me. Honestly, when I heard about Sinister Six, I was also very excited. And I really quickly, I'll just go, since Jeff kind of touched on what he wished he had seen, I wish that they had two villains for each Spider-Man. So
Yeah.
we have Doc Ock and Green Goblin. We have Lizard and
Electro.
Electro. And I have to say that the look of Electro was very good, even though it was Jamie Foxx playing Electro. This time he really looked, I thought, like a version that I could have imagined in the comics. And then I would have brought back the Vulture and Scorpion. And I would have had Lizard turn Scorpion into Scorpion, So, which, you could find a way, they could convince him or something. But basically, I would have had the story be that, these guys come in, these heroes or these villains find themselves in this new universe, and now they want to stay. They find out, no, we're not dead. We want to stay here. We need to find villains here that can help us stay here. That's why they break out the Vulture and Scorpion out of, Scorpion comes along and they turn Scorpion into Scorpion in order for him to be super powered as well.
Mhm.
And then Peter's trying to stop them as they're, whatever the MacGuffin is, but this is classic superhero story. They're trying to find a way to stay. Peter tries to stop them, and different times as he's trying to stop the heists or whatever's going on, the other Spider-Mans come in because they followed their villains through, in time somehow. They got transported through that spell. And then at the end, what you do, and I think the way you really have Tom Holland's Peter Parker grow here is that final fight has three Spider-Mans, and the other two Spider-Mans sacrifice themselves, not dying, but heading back to their realities in order to give Tom Holland a chance in this reality. And then Peter, seeing the way they fight because they're more experienced, seeing the way they take responsibility because they've had more experience as far as being Spider-Man, then takes on all six villains by himself and defeats them. And then at the end of that, then you're like, okay, this is Spider-Man. This is Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who just took on the Sinister Six, sent the other four back to their realities, even though he knows what that might mean for them, and then locks up a now super-powered Scorpion and Vulture again. Talk about, there's all sorts of different ways you can get there, but that would have given us a Sinister Six movie, as well as introduced the concept of the multiverse. So I was really disappointed in that. I was really looking to Sinister Six. They even mentioned it a couple times. They said we got 5, and it was really 4 villains plus, whiny Sandman. So that was disappointing.
Steve, jump on in. What'd you think about the villains?
I was looking forward to the Sinister Five, as I guess we'll go ahead and call them, because that's really what they were. They were the Sinister Five. Part of the problem is that what we've been talking about is that, again, why in the world is Tom Holland trusting them? Why is Spidey trusting these people? Why would he take them up into a secure safe house after all the trouble they went to hide in that place because the whole world is after Spider-Man. We're gonna go
Aunt
trust
May.
these people. Yeah, and Aunt May is up there, and it's like, why would you bring them up there? Doubly so considering that these people are clearly villains. They died fighting Spider-Man. Doc Ock clearly was not treating Spider-Man as like a long lost friend. I mean, how in the world do you not know that they're villains? I mean, they're pretty much wearing villain, tattooed to their foreheads, every single one of them. And how is his spider sense not going off? I mean, as well. In addition, so it's like the whole setup going up there is stupid. He didn't call Happy. Like, he didn't even ask Happy for advice. He didn't even say, hey, Happy, I've got some guests that I want to bring up there because I want to help them. And because, of course, because Happy would have said no, rightly so, because it was stupid. And then you wouldn't have had a story. So, this is more, artificially induced plot stupidity, so that they can have a plot. As to the villains themselves, I have to say that Doc Ock was my favorite. I always liked Molina, and to be honest, I've liked Molina ever since Raiders of the Lost Ark when he was Satipo. Adios, stupido. Yeah, great actor in anything he's in, and he was certainly great as Doc Ock. So gotta love him. I mean, I felt like he actually got some character development, with that. I felt like the way he was handled was okay. Green Goblin. I don't like this character. He's like Spider-Man's Joker, and I don't like the Joker, and I don't like the Green Goblin for the same reasons, but I like Willem Dafoe in it, which is this weird juxtaposition. The thing, though, is that with the mask, I can forgive it a little bit, and that's just because, firstly, he's not from that universe, and secondly, I kind of take the line from Weird Al Yankovic. He's wearing that dumb Power Rangers mask, but he's scarier without it on. And it's true. He's absolutely scarier without the mask. And so it's like, okay, fine. You're not going to come up with a mask that looks scarier than Willem Dafoe's unmasked face. So don't even bother. Just go put him out there. All right, I can forgive that. I can overlook that. Just because he's so good in that. And you can tell that Willem Dafoe is acting it up. Like, he's really into the role. He's really into playing the villain and being the card-carrying villain and hamming it up. And so, I mean, just the performance is enough where I can forgive, okay, the character doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which kind of leads into some points that Jeff brought up, but I want to take him a step further. Yeah, there should have been points where the Sinister Five should have been at each other's throats. There should have been, jockeying for position, for leadership of the group, all that. But the big problem really is, what exactly was their plan? I don't know. I mean, aside from, stopping Spider-Man from sending them back to die, what was their plan? Because we see when, in that scene where we first see Norman Osborn, he's doing the whole villainous cackling. Aha, I have a whole new world to conquer. This world shall be mine. And what exactly does he do to further that? Nothing. I have no idea what his plan is. I mean, they put no thought whatsoever into it. It's just, we're going to get Spider-Man, and we're going to prevent Spider-Man from sending us home, and then we're just going to figure everything out later. I don't think so. I think Goblin would have had a plan. I think that Doc Ock would have had a plan. Maybe Lizard would have had a plan.
I mean, they are supposed to be geniuses.
Yeah, they're all supposed to be smart. So what exactly is their plan? I have no idea. Because we don't see that agenda, we don't get to see the real dynamics among the six. We don't get to see that Sandman should be the most ethical of them and should be the one saying, yeah, I kind of have a problem with killing, a bunch of people in order to get what we want. Okay, you could have had Doc Ock and Goblin scheming for power, and Ock saying, okay, yeah, maybe we ought to do the smart thing instead of the evil thing. You could have had all those sorts of different things, but for that, you had to have, clearly defined motivations and goals, and they don't have any. They're just there, and they're just there to say, okay, we're going to be the villains of this movie, and we're going to stop Peter from sending us home, and that's really about it. And it's unfortunate because some of these characters do have potential. Doc Ock was great. Norman Osborn is at least fun when Willem Dafoe is allowed to ham it up. Lizard can be a good villain. I actually liked him in Amazing Spider-Man 1. Electro, I didn't. I have mixed feelings on Electro, just because on the one hand, it's like I really did not like the Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2. I did not like that character at all. He was just not interesting to me. I felt like, the whole Hollywood nerd thing was terrible. And so I can forgive Jamie Foxx acting like Jamie Foxx, but you're going to have to then say, okay, why is he like this now? Which I guess they tried to do, but it wasn't very good.
At least this Electro was power hungry. He had a motivation to be bad.
Yeah, he did. We don't know what he wants to do with that power. He just wants to get power for its own sake.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been something. But yeah, beyond that, it's just there's not a whole lot to really work with. And then Sandman is just along there for the ride. And you can tell that Lizard and Sandman were just there because they're really tough and can give Peter a tough physical fight. And they're just kind of the muscle.
And I think that if they had given the Sinister Five, or if we had used my idea for a Sinister Six, whatever, an arc, something to do for the Spider-Man to stop them, you could have also set up the future of this universe by doing something where the Green Goblin plants a sabotage, a future bomb in the form of Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin.
Yeah,
that would have been great. And they allude to Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin in the comics.
And they really could have used a Spider-Man from this world, one of his villains, be it Vulture or Mysterio.
Yeah,
as somebody who could show them the ways of this world.
Exactly. That's where Vulture would have worked. That's where Mysterio would have worked. Yeah. So any of those things would have been fine. You could have had a perfectly good Sinister Six movie and it could have worked. But unfortunately, it's just this movie is trying to give you all of the happy member berries, and all of these sorts of things, and they're papering over the fact that they have not really thought this movie out or what the story is or who these characters are.
Well, you've just given me a great idea, Jeff. I mean, you're absolutely right. They could have used a Vulture. I've wanted to see Scorpion. I mean, Scorpion is one of my favorite villains.
Me too.
These other villains come into this world. The first thing they see is J. Jonah Jameson up there ranting about Spider-Man. They track him down. J. Jonah Jameson pays for them to bring Vulture out. Scorpion comes along and pays to have Scorpion turned into him. And then you have the actual comic book origin of Scorpion in the first place.
Jonah pays to have Scorpion made.
There was one other character they could have brought in too, and he's in the end credit scenes, and that's Tom Hardy's Venom.
Yeah,
I mean, we would love to see Tom Hardy's Venom take on the Spideys. That would have been great.
Yeah. So there's so many ways you could have gone.
Right, and they would have been better, but you put more thought into it than they did. So, all right. So we're going to talk about four more things. We're going to talk about Spider-Man versus Strange. We're going to talk about the Three Peters. We're going to talk about that moment. And we're going to talk about the way the movie ends. Let me tell you what we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about Zendaya, MJ, Michelle, whatever, and Ned Leeds because I can't stand them. Okay? Never been able to stand them from the jump. Can't stand them now. You don't need to be there. If you know anything about Peter's life. Now, there's been an argument made that they're trying to turn Peter into Miles. And that Homecoming is actually Miles' crew and it's Miles' story. So there's an argument about that.
Well, let's face it, this Ned Leeds is actually based off of Miles' best friend. It has nothing in common with Peter's best friend.
Yeah.
He even looks like him.
I can't see this Ned Leeds being a contract killer for hire. So,
But no, apparently he's going to be Sorcerer Supreme one day by the looks of things.
He took the words out of my mouth. Didn't they do that thing where he's got powers and he's got magic and all of a sudden and he's got that is like
it's Arrow all over again
from last century where you've got these convenient powers and you know how to work them and they work just fine, just right the first time. And when you need something to happen, just there we go. That's like Samantha from Bewitched. That's like or a genie or something. I don't know, whatever. We ain't gonna talk about them because I can't stand them. I can't stand them. Smart mouth, snarky, disrespectful. They wrote a line in there where she's fronting off the Sorcerer Supreme, talk about maybe you need to apologize to us. Maybe he needs to apologize to you. Really? Really? How many lives have you saved? How many dimensions can you hop? Or what have you done?
And how does Ned know what the Sanctum Sanctorum is?
I can't stand him. I can't stand him. So we ain't talking about that. The only character that I like was Betty.
Can't stand you.
was Betty Brant. I liked her. I liked her, but the rest of I just no. Okay, so since y'all are throwing all of Peter's real life out, then I'm gonna throw y'all sorry side characters out. So we're gonna talk about again. We're gonna talk about the Strange versus Peter. We're gonna talk about the three Peters. We're gonna talk about that moment. We're gonna talk about the way the movie ends, and then we'll be out. Okay, so first we're gonna talk about Strange versus Spider-Man, which was so dumb. I need a new word for dumb. You gonna beat the Sorcerer Supreme with geometry? Now, I have. This is another one I have said for years. I want you to notice that superheroes never seem to ramp up their powers until they're fighting each other. Lord have mercy. I know everybody liked Clash from JLU. I hated Clash. Every time they bring Captain Marvel, he got to fight Superman. Why? And Superman is more ruthless and more brutal, more everything when he's fighting Cap than he ever is when he's fighting Lex Luthor. And that's one of my biggest comic pet peeves, is that whenever they're fighting the villains, they don't seem to be able to find this gumption, this backbone or whatever. But as soon as they fight each other, Lord have mercy, then here they come, pulling out all the stops. Can't stand it. That's one of my most hated superhero tropes. Okay? And so when I'm looking at it here, there's no way Spider-Man beats the Sorcerer Supreme. I'm sorry. Yes, he's faster than him. He has a whole bunch of things, but the way they set it up here, he beat him with geometry. He knew something about a dimension that Strange didn't know. He knew how to figure out something. No. Strange, like the Ancient One, can knock your soul out your body. I'm going to say that one more time. Strange, like the Ancient One, can knock your soul out your body. Be like, nope, nope. And I'm like, oh. It just made me mad watching it. And I'm like, this intelligence and this quick wit and this geometry show would be nice up against the villains. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe when Doc Ock comes out of nowhere and hangs you upside down against the steel beam on the highway, maybe you could use some geometry then. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But as usual, it's not until the heroes fight each other, until now all of a sudden here comes all this extra effort. So I didn't like that at all. I'm like, it humiliates Strange even more. You already have the Sorcerer Supreme apologizing to some smart mouth teenagers. And then you're going to do this. And I'm like, well, if Spider-Man was all that, then the Sinister 4.5 should have never been able to do anything to you. If you can beat the Sorcerer Supreme with geometry. I mean, it's just so juvenile. I'm trying to find the word because it felt like, okay, here it comes. This movie felt like a bunch of different scenes that they strung together. It doesn't have the through line of this is what's happening. It has the feeling of we need this to happen here, so it's going to happen. Okay, we get to the next scene. We're going to forget what we just saw because we need them to be somebody different now. So it feels like a bunch of stream of consciousness. What if Spider-Man Adventures than a through-line movie? But that scene in particular, I was just like, really? Okay, well, I mean, why don't you just have, Ned be Sorcerer Supreme now? Because he's literally better with his powers than Strange. And I was like, so you guys tell me what you thought about that. Tell me what you thought about Strange versus Spider-Man. Start with Steve.
Oh, God, don't even get me started on this whole thing. So while I was watching this earlier on, my thought was going through, okay, Spider-Man is a scientist, or at least he knows enough about science where he could say, okay, don't you know the consequences to reality when you start mucking with it, even if on a quantum level? I mean, shouldn't you know stuff about that? As it turns out, one of the Spider-Men does know about that, and that's Andrew Garfield, because he talks about string theory and the multiverse and all that. Shouldn't Peter know this? And then on top of that, we have him conveniently forget this, when he's talking to Strange and taking the MacGuffin away from Strange, and then suddenly during the fight with Strange, he suddenly remembers how to do science, and it's just just conveniently so he could win that fight, which is completely implausible. No way in the world would he be able to beat Strange like that. No, would not happen. Especially since this is another universe. There is no way that you can rely that the rules that apply to the normal world would apply in the world of mirrors or wherever Strange had him at that point. There is absolutely no way. That is why Strange brought him there, because Strange knew the rules better than Peter did. And so really what should have happened was that Peter should have tried pulling some science mumbo jumbo, and then it turns out it doesn't work because they're in a world where that doesn't work.
Yep.
You know, that would have shown up Peter quite well and said, yeah, nice try, kid. You know, you got some learning to do. You know, that would have been something. But they have to have, you know, Peter get the MacGuffin away from Strange so that the bad stuff can happen, and then we have to have Strange out of the way so that the villains can cause all the problems. So we have to conveniently put him in that situation, and it doesn't work. The execution is terrible. It makes no sense. There is no way that I buy any of the things happening, especially after Strange punched him, did the soul punch, knocked him out of his body, and then Peter somehow, you know, is able to put himself back in his body without any training or knowledge about how to use astral forms or anything like that. No,
Right.
he just suddenly knows how to do this, and I haven't seen anybody in any previous movies that Strange has done this to be able to do that. That is not like a trained sorcerer. So yeah, I'm not buying it. It makes absolutely no sense. As for, you know, the Wonder Twins, Zendaya and Ned Leeds, yeah, they're no good. I can't even call the Zendaya character MJ, you know, to me, because she doesn't even act like MJ in any way. She's basically this goth teen, or well, not really goth teen, but you know, more
emo.
like
She's emo and she's sullen.
She's emo. That's what I was looking for. You know, she's this emo teen, you know, likes to go on about how smart she thinks she is, and it's irritating. And no, she should not be, you know, cursing, you know, well, not cursing out, but you know, sticking it to the Sorcerer Supreme. Yeah, disrespected. Yeah. You're finding the words that I'm looking for. This is how nuts this movie makes me with everything that doesn't work. That I'm just kind of completely losing my vocabulary. So yeah, it's everything about this doesn't work. You know, why would Peter go to these two when he could get Daredevil or an Avenger or anybody to help him that would actually be useful instead of having these two around as comic relief? And oh, by the way, if you're concerned about these people being safe, you know, because of your actions, why are you dragging them in with you? Never explain. Makes no sense. Get these two out of the way, please.
Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Punisher, if you really want to kill people, you know, it's just
well,
people got lots of options.
Yeah, but yeah,
that's why I can't talk about MJ. I can't even call her MJ, but it will bring out a rant. I can't even talk about her.
That's why I call her Michelle. I am not doing her the justice
because
of calling
she's
her
so
MJ.
awful. She's another Lana Lang. She's another character that is worshipped and followed and all this different kind of stuff. And you have demonstrated absolutely no reason other than being young and attractive. You've demonstrated no reason for you to get all the props that you get.
She's got one redeeming quality. And it's the fact that her and Tom have great chemistry, and that's because they're dating in real life.
Yeah.
So that's the only honest thing. Other than that, I can't stand the character.
Wait till they break up.
Yeah.
All right, Bracy, thoughts about Strange versus Spider-Man?
Yeah, this is going to be real short. I'm gonna do it as sign language. I know you can't see it. Some of you might get what this is. That's bullshit. Strange says, like, I'm taking you to the mirror universe because this is where I've got all the powers. Yeah, he knows the rules. He, you know, what they say, we gather energy and we shape reality in Doctor Strange. And Peter pulls something out of his butt. Man, that was some Silver Age crap right there. Like, let me just make up something and make it happen. I still don't understand exactly how he beat Doctor Strange by webbing him to a fractal pattern. What did that do, for instance? Doctor Strange can leave his body and still go kick your butt. He'll just fly over there astrally, soul punch you out of your body where you don't have any superpowers, beat the crap out of you, and then go, you know, take the MacGuffin back and, you know, set himself free.
And have a fish sandwich or something.
Yeah, like the whole Loki thing. You're like, I've been falling for 30 minutes. That should have been Spider-Man. It's completely implausible. As much as like I'm a Spider-Man fanboy, there is just no way, even if I'm looking purely objectively at MCU Spider-Man, MCU Doctor Strange, what they can do, there's no way Spider-Man wins this. The conclusion of the fight didn't make any sense. They're like, let me just spat off some techno babble and do a thing, and hey, guess what? It just worked because.
Nims, Strange versus Spider-Man.
Yeah, you guys have hit the actuality of the scene, so I'm going to take it to a little higher level for a second and say that this, in my opinion, is the worst and most disrespectful scene in the entire movie. And the reason why is because it's so disrespectful to geeks, comic fans, people who have followed this forever, is we all have this little thing called the great encyclopedias of DC or Marvel Comics or whatever, where we read about these characters. And each of these characters have power types and they have power levels. And you got to stay in your lane and you have power levels. So certain characters, for instance, Daredevil, are physical fighters who has, he has these sonar ability, but he's on a certain level. And he couldn't fight, for instance, Thanos.
Or
yeah, in the same way that Superman is on a certain level. However, when he's fighting Shazam, which I know DT hates, Superman is weak to magic. He can be harmed by magic in a way that he couldn't be harmed by, say, let's, take a super strong character, Bane punching Superman. Superman laughs at that and just shakes it off. So we have gone over these things over and over and over again in our heads. We know what the power levels are. We know what the types of powers are, the power types, and we know how they work in these worlds. Spider-Man has no power set and no power level, which could compete with Doctor Strange. I challenge anyone out there, comic accurately, to explain to me how Spider-Man has anything that can deal with Doctor Strange. You can't. It's impossible. And so this whole scene is so disrespectful of geek culture and comic book fans, I can't even begin to explain it. This is the one that makes me the angriest in the whole thing, because I'm like, the Sorcerer Supreme has foes that can harm him, but they have different power sets and are on a completely different power level. I mean, you're talking Doctor Doom level to deal with Doctor Strange. And I'm sorry, Spider-Man is going to get his ass kicked by Doctor Doom.
You're talking global threats are bigger.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't do that, and now I'm going to go on a rant, little mini rant. The reason they don't do that is because they got their damn movie to sell, and so they don't care about the integrity of what is going on in these worlds and who these characters are. Peter can deal with some high-level threats, but at his core, he's a street-level superhero. He's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
That's right.
The big stuff is dealt with by the big-time heroes. And you know what? In the comics, most of the time, Peter doesn't want to deal with that.
The whole point of Homecoming was that he's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I deal with the small things that the Avengers don't really worry about.
Yeah, he's got the same mentality to a certain extent that Green Arrow does in the Justice League cartoon, where he says, look, you guys deal with the monsters and everything. I'm helping the little people. I'm down here doing the stuff that you guys ignore when you're off fighting Starro and everything, because the little people need a hero too. That's Spider-Man. And so they're so damn disrespectful. Excuse my language, but they really are. They're so damn disrespectful to what is going on and who these characters are. It's the same way with like Luke Cage. Luke Cage stops gang wars, not because Luke Cage doesn't have the power. That's because that's where Luke Cage is. That's what he cares about and who he wants to protect. And more power to him. Credit to Luke Cage for doing that, Power Man. He's out there doing that because that's what Power Man's heroic arc is. And they don't care. They just don't care.
They don't care. And Homecoming made a point of showing that Spider-Man is hamstrung without buildings to swing from. So the great Spider-Man got to get a cab. Okay, girls, that's a joke. Okay. So that's once again, why I don't like to talk. I can't talk about them characters without ranting because they're so lame. But Nim said the most disrespectful scene at all with Strange, this kind of thing. And here's my thing, then we're going to move on. You can't have regular heroes fight a reality warper.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're dealing with Proteus, if we're dealing with Dark Phoenix, if we're dealing with Doctor Strange, we're dealing with any character that's a reality warper. Regular people can't fight them. Okay, regular heroes can't fight them. So I'm gonna leave that right there because that's a whole nother rant. Okay, next we're going to deal with the three Peters, and then we're going to get to that scene, and then we're going to talk about how the movie ends. So, in terms of the three Peters, this was another thing that I thought was a peak moment, a peak quality, a peak thing with the film. One of the most enjoyable parts of the film is their camaraderie, their getting together and seeing their similarities and their differences. My absolute favorite moment is when, which is what I hope would, the one moment that I hope would happen actually did happen when they're talking about Toby Peter manufacturing his own webs, and Garfield and Holland are like, well, how do you do that? And he's like, let's not talk about it. So, but that cracked me up because I know I get a lot of heat for it on Twitter, but I became a convert to organic web shooters. I always thought it didn't make any sense. Spider-Man couldn't make his own webs. And then once I saw it in action, I was like, yep, it should be like that. But I came up with a solution a long time ago. There's a way to have Peter still have his genius, and that is that he can make mechanical web shooters that regulate his stuff. He can have things that back up his webs if he ever runs out. We can still have both, but comic people, we just get really insane and we don't like to compromise, my way or the highway. So I get that, but I still like, because it doesn't make any sense that you get all the properties of a spider with your DNA being rewritten,
except one,
except the things that spiders are most known for, besides sticking the walls, and that's creating their own webs.
Spider-Man 2099, I thought they really did a good job with that.
Yeah.
So, so they gave Peter that for a while in the comics, and then they took it back. And I understand the arguments for the mechanical web shooters, and they do need to show Peter's genius, and I'm not against that at all. And I think that's right. I think that's part of its core. I just like organic better. But anyway, so, but I really like their moments. And when you look at some of the outtakes or the blooper reels, some stuff on YouTube, you can tell that the three actors were enjoying it themselves. They really enjoyed being in the same room together and cracking the jokes and all that. This is also the only time where it's acceptable to have the mask off. When you're with your doppelgangers from other dimensions, there's no need to have your Spider-Man mask on. And so, like I said, the jokes they cracked, and then also they at least tried to give a nod to Peter's genius in their scene where they were trying to come up with the plans and the fluid and a whole bunch of different stuff. If you know anything about Spidey from the comics, man, he invented different kinds of webbing. That's what I mean when I say he can have his natural webs. So one thing you have to understand about Spider-Man, and you'll see it in the cartoons, Spider-Man's webbing works the same way Captain America's shield does, which is it must be telekinesis. There's no way Cap's shield could do what it does. Not possible. Okay? There's
a shield is a reality warper. It's Doctor Strange in other forms.
There's no way. When you look at the stuff Cap's shield does, it's like it has to be following a telepathic command. Like in Civil War, he rolls it on the ground, it bounces up and hits the villain in the head and comes right to. But anyway, so that's what I mean when I say it's entirely possible to have Peter both have natural webbing that can only do so much, and then have artificial webbing that does all the crazy things. Because Spider-Man makes ropes, he makes parachutes, he makes nets of different sizes. Some webbing is more sticky than others. Some of it dissolves faster. Sometimes it's that thin line that he hangs upside down from. Okay, so you have to explain that some kind of way. So that's what I'm saying. You can have both organic and mechanical, but I like them dealing with all those different things, because you couldn't spray. Let me get my Spider-Man fingers, because my little cousin used to imitate me doing this all the time. When I was little, I'd be walking around talking about whip. He would imitate me. He'd be like, psh. So anyway, there's no way you could have that webbing come out and then it snakes itself into like a lasso. How? Okay, real spiders can't do that. So, but anyway, but I love them being together. I love Toby feeling kind of like the senior Spider-Man, the leader, and this movie solidified him again as my favorite. I love them realizing, because they had a sudden burst of intelligence, that why don't we play to our strengths? That just had me cracking up. I'm like, really? Really, y'all just now figuring out that's what you should do? Well, okay. So they said, why don't we play to our strengths? And they did. and it was just fun to watch. I mean, if I couldn't say anything else about it, it's probably the most fun part of the entire film is just watching them hang out and laugh and crack jokes, and it was such a, it wasn't even an uncle vibe, it was a big brother vibe. You know, my big bro is older than me and he's been through things that I've been through, and he kind of understands me what I'm going through, so he's got some advice that's just right on point. He knows how to talk to me, he understands what I'm going through in a way that nobody else does. And if you have a big brother, or if you are a big brother, you know what I'm talking about. You know that feeling. There's just something about your big brother putting his arm around you and telling you, I understand. You know, I love you when you're doing well. I love you when you fail. But no matter what, I understand. It's something about that. And so I got that vibe from the three of them, and it was great. So I'd have to say it was probably the highlight, besides the villains, probably the highlight of the film for me. And then when we get more to talking about the ending, we're going to talk a little more about them in action, which was great. Well, no, which was really good, but could have been great. It was really, really good, but it could have been mind-blowing. But we'll get to that in a minute. But for right now, we're just talking about the three Peters, and we already talked about how the skip-de-doo Popeye kind of way they came through the portal, like, oh, I'm just walking around in this new world. Hey, I'm Spider-Man. How y'all doing? Oh, okay. But besides that, I just really liked him. I wouldn't be surprised if they recreate this dynamic in future films. I think this works so well. I would not be surprised at all if we see it again. So let me hear your thoughts about the three Peters. Start with Bracy.
Yeah, this was absolutely my favorite part of the film as well. These guys gelled together. You'd think the three of the actors had been longtime friends, and I really believe I bought into the fact that these were the same character, separated about 10 years apart apiece. They really sold me on that. I like, Toby is the elder statesman of the two. Andrew is the bit world weary Spider-Man, and of course, like there's a Tom as the new and enthusiastic young kid on the block, and that's one of the things I loved about him when he was introduced in Civil War. That wide-eyed exuberance about being Spider-Man. When he catches the Winter Soldier's hands, like, dude, you've got a metal arm. He's just freaked out by how cool that is.
So wait, you mean like 15, 25, and 35?
Well, Spider-Man in this movie is 17.
Okay, so
but I know the actors are separated by about a decade each, and they go ahead and play into that because they treat each of them like Toby was Spider-Man in '99, and Garfield in his period, him, because they're all older than each other. So there's that separation by age, which I thought was really cool that they played into that. They didn't CGI them all down to the same age and that sort of thing. So I really like that because it does feel like brothers, like you said. There's older brother, middle brother, little brother, and it's really funny thinking of it like that because Andrew is the most angsty, so he does really come off as the middle brother, that middle child syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But I love them because they all clearly really get the sort of character of Peter, the sort of awkwardness, the geekiness, the jokes that come out, and watching them interact was just a pure joy. And I love them trading stories, like, what's the coolest thing you ever fought? It's so it's so neat. And just the off the cuff comments at Andrew's sitting there with his arm around Toby's like, you're in so much pain. I am in so much pain. And they both got back. And the two of them have back problems from fighting villains because they're older than Tom. It's just really great. And again, like you said, it was so cool to see Spider-Man actually do the science. It's like with the new Batman film, actually getting to see Batman be a detective for the majority of the film. Something we only got a taste of in Batman versus Superman. And it's not just the web shooters, which are an incredible invention in the comic lore, but Spider-Man even, I'd love to see somebody do spider tracers. He invents these little trackers, these sticky trackers he can throw on his villains or on their gear or on their vehicles, and his spider sense picks them up, and that's how he tracks a lot of his villains back to their lairs. He's got his little spider flashlight, spider signal, all kinds of gear Spider-Man uses. He made the Spider-Mobile, which is a little hokey. He's good with robotics. He's really very brilliant and it was nice to see them kind of get into that sort of thing. The fact that Peter is both a chemist and an engineer, very smart individual, and I loved watching them play around in the lab. And again, the situational stuff when like Ned's calling for like Peter, and they're like, "Oh, what?" And he's like, Peter Parker. Yeah. Like Spider-Man, still the same. That was a classic moment right there. And I felt like that is such a Spider-Man moment right there to see that kind of humor pop off. So again, it was just the greatest thing. And I wish there could have actually been more. It was a nice third act kind of surprise, even though, it got spoiled by the internet. But I could definitely see. I do hope Sony goes back to that sometime, since they'll have all three of these guys on tap. I would like to see a little bit more of that, because that was really, really enjoyable.
Really enjoyable. Nims, what do you think about the three Peters?
Yeah, I'm going to go in a different direction, you guys.
Do it.
I really like their relationship together. I enjoyed that, but two aspects of it really disappointed me. It really disappointed me. First of all, it disappointed me that they all came in as cameos, trying to pop in anywhere, when I thought you could have done a lot more world building by Peter going to places that are familiar to him, places that he loves, and finding the other Peter there, so that there is some commonality across the world,
Yeah.
But I think we would have needed a 3-hour film for that.
Yeah. The other aspect that really bothered me is, I appreciated the humor and everything, but when you're bringing these characters in, I think they missed an opportunity story-wise. I think that you could have had moments of reflection and foreshadowing for this Spider-Man with Tom Holland, where Tobey Maguire is going, I've done all this, and, just word of warning, through all of this, I've lost some good friends, harkening back to Harry Osborn, who became the Green Goblin. And then Andrew Garfield's like, and I lost the love of my life, going back to Gwen Stacy, and then you flash back to Ned and Michelle, but you have foreshadowing of what could be, and it's like, and it puts that thought in Tom Holland's head. It's like, there could be some personal tragedies. And that's part of being a big brother too, is that you impart your wisdom, and these guys have lived the wars, so give us a little bit of that as well. And I wish they had really done that. So those were the two things that I thought that they really missed out on. I do agree with you, though. I thought the camaraderie and chemistry between them was great. I just wish they had done a little bit more of that.
Cool. Steve, three Peters.
Yeah, I will say, I wanted to see these three actors together in a Spider-Man film in some time, but I didn't really necessarily want to see them in these as the three movie Spideys. I was hoping that they would do a Clone Saga movie, and then you would have the other two as the clones. I still hope that they will one day do that. I don't think they're going to, but it would have been nice. As it is, though, this kind of gives you a sense of what that would have been like. In a way, it kind of feels like a multi-Doctor episode of Doctor Who, where you see these three different incarnations kind of meet and interact, and they have their little adventure together. And I would say that's kind of where the strength really is. It's with the three Peters interacting. It's not with Spider-Man worrying and angsting over his secret identity or any of this stuff, or people dying and him having to make up for his mistake. No, it is these three people who are the same person, learning from each other and teaming together to fight a multiverse level threat. It is Spider-Verse without necessarily calling it that. Although I would say probably Into the Spider-Verse handled this a lot better. But in the scenes that we get, it is really interesting. And one of the things that I really like is that the other two Spider-Men know exactly where Peter's gone, because he's hurting. Because where would he go? Where they would go.
Right.
And I thought, so that kind of stuff was really, really interesting. I love Tobey Maguire in this movie more than I had liked him in actually the original movies that he was in. Because I felt like this is a more mature version of Tobey's Peter. I feel like he learned all the lessons from the three movies. And I think he found a way to balance being Spider-Man and Peter Parker in a healthy way. And I think that he's trying to impart that to Holland Spidey, who is not listening to him. and so it's just really fun to see that. And in the middle you have the Andrew Garfield Spidey, who is the one who has suffered the most loss, or the I would say the most painful loss, which is the loss of Gwen as well as Uncle Ben. So he's gotten doubly hit, and his whole angle is, I need to find a way to validate that I can still do this, that I'm capable of being Spider-Man. And he learns from the other two, and he eventually makes peace with that, and that's his growth arc. So I kind of felt like the other two Spideys were better Peter Parkers and better protagonists in a film that was about Tom Holland's Spidey. And I think I think to me that just highlights the disappointment I had with the entire way that Holland Spidey was written the entire time. Because here you are seeing these other Spideys, who have gone through the ringer and they have learned their lessons and they've clearly grown from them. And you see the main character that the story's about, and he's not learning or not growing and not taking anything seriously, and he's not being responsible like the other two have. And because the other two have learned the lessons that he should have learned, because they suffered the loss of their Uncle Ben. Mm-hmm. So because of that, and because Tom Holland's Spidey has not, you see a definite difference between them. And I think while a lot of it is fun to see them together, and you can sort of tell that the three actors have genuine off-screen chemistry. These people are friends, and you get to see them, and you especially get to see that in some of the fun outtakes in the moments, like they do the meme, where you have the three Spider-Men pointing at each other. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff is great. But unfortunately, it highlights how badly Holland's character is written compared to the other two that are just so much better. And it ended up making me want to watch the Tobey Spider-Man films again, because I ended up liking Tobey more and liking Holland's Spidey less.
Okay, I could not possibly agree more with that last thing you just said. Everything you said, just a complete ditto for me. I like Tobey so much more, and it has had a retroactive effect on how I see his films. And Holland Spider-Man, so keying in off of what Jeff said, that puts them at 17, 27, and 37. So Tobey Spider-Man is pushing 40. Keying in off of what you said originally, I can see Garfield actually as Ben Reilly.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah.
He does look like that.
Yeah,
he has the right look.
I can totally see him, and he's apologetic like Ben Reilly is too. So I could definitely buy that. Okay, let's keep it moving, and we're going to talk about Lord have mercy. We're going to talk about that moment.
Oh no, there's the other bad part. Yeah,
I think that was worse than the other thing we talked about.
Now they've known, co-hosts have known from the jump. As soon as I brought it up, they know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those of you that aren't, here it comes. Spoiler alert: May dies in the film, and she deserves her stupid death for bringing a bunch of villains in the happiest thing. But there's that part. But they give May Uncle Ben's line in that you must realize, Peter, that with great power must come great responsibility. And then she croaks. And then she dies from a wound sustained in the skirmish that nobody could have seen coming, a bunch of villains. And then she bleeds out or she's broken from the inside or whatever. And so it is the ultimate, like it's celluloid spit in your face. It's the ultimate slap in the face of fans that know that is Uncle Ben's death by the burglar. For those of you that don't know Spider-Man lore, Peter suited up after he discovered his powers. He went to a wrestling contest. He wanted to get money and women and cars and fame. He actually wanted to be an actor. And after he got through with a wrestling match, a burglar or some dude had stolen the cash from the organizer of the match, and he ran right past Peter, and the organizer said, "Hey, Spider-Man, help me stop that guy." And Peter just looked at him, and he got in the elevator, and Spider-Man was like, "Not my problem." Later on, Peter comes home, and his house is cordoned off, and there's a bunch of cops, and it's a crime scene. He's like, "What happened?" Find out Uncle Ben has been shot because a burglar broke in and killed his uncle. Peter suits up. He's angry. He tracks this guy down. He gets him in a warehouse, and right before everything, he finishes, he wouldn't have killed him, but he knocked him out. He pulls back and gets the guy in the light, and he sees that it's the very dude he could have stopped when he was at the wrestling match. He takes his mask off, he starts crying, and he says, I can't believe it. Uncle Ben is dead because of me, because I refused to stop this guy, because I was so selfish I wouldn't get involved. Uncle Ben does not say, with great power comes great responsibility. Stan Lee says it as the narrator in the last panel of the comic. So everybody swarmed on my timeline on Twitter and said, well, they got retconned to where Uncle Ben said. I'm talking about the origin of Spider-Man. I'm talking about the way Stan Lee wrote it and Steve Ditko drew it. I'm not talking about the retcons.
With great power, there must also come great responsibility.
Right, there must also come. Right, not with great power comes. With great power, there must also come is the exact quote. And then you see Spider-Man kind of slumping off in the night, and that's how we meet him. That's the core of who Peter is and why he does what he does. And every time he'd be tempted to quit, because he's tried to quit being Spider-Man several times. And every time he doesn't want to get involved, that comes back to him. That moment where I chose not to get involved and it cost me my Uncle Ben. This is the core. So this Holland series has been determined to minimize and eliminate Uncle Ben. I don't know why, but everybody that loves Spidey from the comics can't stand it. It's been one of the longest running arguments in the Holland movies. We can't stand it because it's not Tony Stark. It's Uncle Ben that made the difference. And you can't give Tony Stark that role. That's laughably ridiculous. But here, they give the line to May, and now what? She's dead. Why? And that's not the turning point. He's already Spider-Man, and it's just like, it was like a pointed way of saying we're not going to give you what you want. Because remember in the last movie, we saw Uncle Ben's initials on a briefcase, and all the people said, well, Uncle Ben was in the movie. I couldn't believe that argument. I couldn't believe the number of people that swarmed to my Twitter timeline talking about, well, Uncle Ben was in the movie. I'm like, where? Well, his initials was on the briefcase. I was like, really? And so this is what I mean about when you write a character, but you don't understand. This is like the Waynes not dying. This is like Krypton not exploding. Okay? You can't have that. This is like Reed and Sue and Ben and Johnny being like, yeah, you know what? I don't think we're going to space. Let's just Uber and get some pizza. You can't take away these threads, these foundational, these bricks, these cornerstones, and it still be the same character. It's not possible. And here's the thing, here's the cherry on top of everything I just said. May dying didn't really make any difference. Not really. You know, I know they wanted it to have impact and all that different kind of stuff, but they already made this guy a loser. They already made this guy inept. They already made this guy destroy worlds in the process of his small-minded thinking. They already made this guy someone who has to, you know, I always told my son growing up, I was like, let me tell you something about your friends. They don't know any more than you do. You want to know something about life, you ask me. I'm your dad. I'm further down the road of life than you are. I've been you and I'm me. So you listen to the people your same age, they don't know any more than you do. So there's nothing, I hate to say, almost completely nothing redeeming about Holland Spider-Man after this movie, but definitely May's death. So you're going to eliminate Uncle Ben, you're going to kill Aunt May in a stupid way for no reason, which is actually her fault, and then you're going to give her the line? I was like, that's like the ultimate disrespect as a Spider-Man fan. I was like, okay, if I wasn't out the movie now, y'all to knock me into another dimension with that foolishness. And I was like, so it was such a stunning, unexpected kind of thing until your jaw dropped, and we're still kind of like, what? You know that feeling you get when somebody hits you in the face? Well, not them two, because they know how to react like military people. They better hit you back so fast you see the finger draw back. But I'm talking about regular non-military folks. If you ever get hit in the face, there's a moment where the sting makes you stop and think, did I just get hit in the face? You got that moment? That's what that moment felt like to me, like that, wait a minute. Did I just get swung on? Like, boom. Like that. That's what that felt like to me. And I'm like, whatever goodwill I had for this film, I won't say y'all 100% killed it, but y'all brought it to the dead man level. I was like, this is not something we can get past. Steve said it earlier. He said there's some stuff you can't get past. We aren't able to get past Luke with the blue breast milk from the whatever that thing was. We ain't able to get past that. Okay? And we're not able to get past May dying for no reason, and she get Uncle Ben's line, and we ain't seen hide nor hair of Ben in the Holland film. Nope. So I'm gonna say this last thing, and I'm gonna turn it over to my co-host. I don't understand why they let people that hate these characters write these characters. I don't understand. I don't understand why. Why do you let people that hate everything they are, hate everything they stand for, and hate everybody that loves them? Why can't we write Spider-Man? Why don't y'all hire us? Hire us as a team. Hire all four of us. We'll write your 4 movies. You'll love them. Okay? Why can't we? Why, when you go looking for writers, do you pick people with no IMDb credits? Why, when you go looking for writers, do you pick people that hate everything that Stan Lee and Ditko and Kirby and all the people built back in the 60s? Why? I don't understand it. I really, because there's no other industry that does that. They don't hire nobody that hates cars to design cars. Okay? If you are a school teacher and you hate kids, they're going to fire you. They should fire you. You can't be yelling at them children all day. You got to love children and work with children. But for some reason, they go out and they find people that say, we are going to purposely spit on everything that makes this character them. And then we're going to say, it's the fault of a bunch of angry fanboys, and no other genre says, why can't we have the characters we fell in love with? Why can't we have the characters we met? Why can't we see them in these different mediums? Nobody says that except superhero people. Can't figure it out. Can't figure it out. So let me hear your thoughts on all that, what I just said, that moment, and why it seems to be the people that hate what we love the most that gets the jobs. Nemesis, start with you.
Yeah,
I know I said a lot.
I watched this movie with my kids. There were 2 moments where I was completely taken out of the, enjoyment factor, where I was just enjoying the movie. The first was the Doctor Strange, and the second was this. Those 2 moments, I sat back in my chair. I was like, oh no. And yeah, I mean, everything else came upon reflection, but those 2 moments in the theater, I was like, this isn't right. Now, that said, I think that this thing with May, I don't think that it's hating the characters. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of who Spider-Man is and what that line means to that character. So I think it's a concept where they just don't understand what's going on. And I say that, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. The first moment where Stan Lee writes, the line, it's about the fact that, it's like my wife always says, when I'm dwelling on myself or whatever, and I need to move past things, she tells me, get over yourself. It's one of the greatest amounts of wisdom she can ever tell me. She said it forever, and God bless her for saying it, because it gets me focused again. That moment where Ben dies is basically the world telling Spider-Man to get over himself, to stop thinking yourself, and to focus on what's right here. And that defines him as that street level superhero, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. This moment where May dies, first of all, May fights, and I don't want to get into all that. It's ridiculous. But this moment where May dies and then says the line, with great power comes great responsibility, she's telling Peter to be full of himself, that you're imposing your will on the world is right and justified, that you are righteous in doing these things, because that's how May sees herself through the whole movie, as righteous.
Yes.
Peter is a defender. May is a crusader. The same line, 2 completely different concepts. So now you have given Peter not the defender role, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's your crusading Spider-Man for a social justice cause.
Yeah, you said it.
And that is the fundamental problem with all of this. Beyond the fact that, May should never utter that line, you've changed his origin story and everything, you fundamentally misunderstand the whole arc, the purpose of the character. And whether you've done it on purpose or not, I'm not going to try and read your mind. You've changed the character from a defender of the common man to a crusader for causes. And that's inexcusable.
Defender of the common man versus a crusader for causes. That's right. Go ahead, Bracy. What do you think about that scene?
I've already stated how they didn't do the Uncle Ben thing. And I understand wanting to skip over a well-known origin. We don't need to see Batman's origin in every single movie. We don't need to see Superman's origin in every single movie. I got that. But when they first introduced Spider-Man in Civil War, I thought for sure the Uncle Ben thing had happened. But they gloss over it. And now after seeing the subsequent 3 films, I realized that they have erased Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm.
They've completely erased him. It's much the same way in Man of Steel they subverted Jonathan Kent. This, Superman comes from Middle America, the heartland, the nuclear family, all those values, the things that made America great. And Zack Snyder decided to deconstruct that and have his dad be this incredibly negative influence. But his mother was his guiding light and his savior, instead of the two of them acting as parents. And I don't care what people say socially these days, and you can say, strong single mother and all that, but a family is a mother, a father, and your children. And it takes 2 parents to truly make a well-balanced individual. And for a time, Peter had that. But we're going to gloss over all of that. We're going to erase Uncle Ben entirely. We don't see his impact at all in Peter's life. What's his male figure? It's Tony Stark, a guy with no impulse control, womanizer. He ends up being brilliant. He ends up being a hero. It takes him literally to the end of his career to finally complete his arc, to make the sacrifice play. As Captain America said, you're not the guy to make the sacrifice
play.
He was dancing around the edge of actually being a hero his entire movie career.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not really the guy to look up to. Peter's kind of fanboying over him because he's brilliant. And, that's one of his pros, but he's got a swath of cons that you don't want to be your influencing mentorship of. So they get rid of what makes Peter a hero at his core, the reason that he does what he does, and the reason why he can never stop doing it. Even like you said, he tries to retire so many times because it's a very stressful life. It gets in the way of him having a normal life. And Garfield's Peter put it out, I guess, that a regular life isn't for guys like us. And it can be, but it's not ever going to be truly regular. And, that's where Toby's right on that point. You got to work very hard at it. So we don't get that. And I hated this scene. I could see it coming. So easy to see coming. And sure enough, Goblin takes her out, hits her with a glider. And then there's this ridiculous thing where I guess she's running off adrenaline or she's in shock because she's up and at him way too long. You okay? You okay? You okay? You okay? Oh, I'm bleeding out, by the way, but, I haven't realized it yet. I've got all these internal injuries. They haven't stopped me yet. And then she finally goes down. And she starts validating everything that leads to her death. Aunt May is somewhat the ultimate universe version of Aunt May here, where her and Uncle Ben went from being good, standing Protestant people who, because that was her values. I believe they've just comic historians have discussed Peter's basically a Protestant. And so, you've got those ethics, those morals, that sort of thing. And in the Ultimate Universe, which, the MCU is pulled from, and all the Marvel movies across the board, really, from Fox, X-Men, all these, they're hippies. And she's such a hippie here because what is she? She's a social worker. And there's nothing wrong with being a social worker. There's nothing wrong with helping people. but she's really imparting all the wrong lessons here. And she doesn't understand the bigger picture because she's micro focused on individuals. And because of that, she leads Peter horribly astray. When Nemesis says she's the villain of the piece, he's not entirely wrong here. Because she validates everything goes wrong. All these dumb decisions Peter makes, she's like, it was the right thing to do. We would have done it all again. This is what we do. He broke the world. He broke the world. And you're okay with that. And now he's going to be alone. And he's going to suffer the rest of his life because you're going to be gone. And it's his fault. And you still give him the pat on the back. Because, unfortunately, that's what people with this sort of ideology do. It's all pats on the backs. It's Shakespeare's Sound and Fury signifying nothing. It's empty calories. It's meaningless. There is no granite foundation of morality or all the heroic virtues, the prudence, the courage, all those things, the right reason, all the things that make a real hero. And it's all just been completely subverted because they want to, and I really believe it's like this, look at what a tremendous single mother May is, how great she is. She's what made Spider-Man, and it's wrong. And in the end, she proves it's wrong because this is where the movie fails most utterly.
That's what made me so mad. To key in on what you said, every statistic that we have that measures success as an adult points to the fact that children with fathers do better.
Mm-hmm.
There are no exceptions. As long as we've been tracking statistics about how kids turn out, there is no stat that doesn't support that children do better with their fathers, period, dot, the end. But the other thing that you said that crystallized it for me, you know how sometimes, like Steve was saying, sometimes you can hear your friends say the word that you've been searching for?
Yeah.
It's what you said when you said she was a hippie. I was like, oh, okay. Because it's the everything we do is good. We can't be criticized, like you said, even in the midst of great failure. That's what I call the phenomenon of a trophy for 13th place. That is what has affected a generation in a negative way. When we start giving out trophies for 13th place, you're in a 13-person race and you come in last, but everybody's a winner and you get a trophy. No, you don't. It's the kick in your teeth. It's your enemies laughing at you. It's the dirt in your mouth of coming in dead last that produces the championship drive. And anybody that knows how to be a champion knows that. It's the pain that brought out the winner in you. And when you eliminate all that, like they do here, it's like you said, you just said it so well that she just pats him on the back and this is what we do. And no, what you did was stupid from start to finish. Now you're dead, and now he's alone in the world. We're going to get to that some more when we get to the ending. Steve, this scene.
Oh my God, where do I even start with this? I think all of you have made a lot of points, and I'm going to probably build on a few of them. One I would say is the idea that the bringing up of John Kent from Man of Steel really was on my mind as well, because to me, this version of Aunt May is like the opposite version of that character, but bad. Because what you have is with John Kent in that movie, you had somebody that didn't want his son to be a hero. He didn't want him to get out of there, even though it meant people dying. Oh, should I just let him die? Maybe. Don't save me even though I'm in a tornado and dying. It seems like May is like the opposite extreme of that, where she's encouraging him to make more and more bad decisions because she thinks they're somehow justified. Oh, well, as long as you meant well and as long as it came from the heart, it's okay. And it's like, yeah, but his decisions have terrible consequences. And as Chuck said, he did break the world. Not to mention that May's death, okay, yeah, it's her fault, but it's also Peter's. Mm-hmm. Peter was the one who set up the situation with a spell. Peter is the one that went and took the doohickey away from Doctor Strange and put Doctor Strange out of action for however long. And he's the one who trusted these supervillains and brought him to their safe house without even asking the owner of the place if they could stay there. And all of these things that happens, including May's death, is a fallout of all this. Never mind all the fallout of the stuff that Peter did in the last movie that led to this, which we already talked about. So all of this is Peter's fault, and May is rewarding him for this. She's saying, yeah, yep, keep doing that. Keep making all these bad decisions. Keep doubling down on every single failure that you make. And the thing of it is, I mean, I have problems with Peter Parker in the comics. I have problems with his motivation in the comics, because I think his guilt drives him to do terrible, self-destructive things as well. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that at least in the comics, he had the influence of Uncle Ben to give him some restraint. At least he had the influence of Ben's death and the example that he set, and to say, okay, I went too far. And I only thought of myself and I screwed up. So I'm going to at least try to be a good person. I may not always succeed, but I'm going to try to be a good person. But, here he basically is with no restraints. And this is the consequence of the other point that I was going to bring up, which is that, yeah, they are erasing Uncle Ben. And originally in the first movie or so, I was thinking, okay, they're just glossing it over because they don't want to rehash the origin. Fair enough. He's in the background somewhere. He existed. Maybe he married May, and the origin happened as we know it. Etc. We just didn't see it. Fine. I would have been fine with that. But as we see here, he doesn't even know that the words Uncle Ben do not come out of anyone's mouths in this movie until the two Peters come from the other dimensions and they bring him up. So May is the one that comes up with the line. Now, if it had been, oh yeah, my dead husband Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. He was right, and you need to undo what you did here. That would have been something. But no, she appropriates a line that was associated with Uncle Ben to build her up, and they completely erase the presence of Uncle Ben until he has to show up because the other two had them as part of their backstories. So you have a Spider-Man, that does not have any backstop whatsoever, and he's making even worse decisions than he would with the regular origin. And I am absolutely stunned, because I would have thought that, okay, if you're going to experiment and change the origin, it should be in a way that, that has fewer problems with the character, not adding to them. They have made Tom Holland a worse version of Spider-Man than the one I have problems with. And I can't believe that they did that. And this scene is the encapsulation of everything wrong with Spider-Man as a character. I couldn't believe it.
See, I think Peter is secretly Catholic because he's got a martyr complex all his entire life over the
massively.
So
yeah, it's funny because
even Daredevil has isn't as bad as this.
Yeah, he's kind of looked at as Protestant, but man, he's rocking that Catholic guilt like nobody's business.
Yeah,
well,
and that defines him. So
I think you summed it up, Steve. That how can you make the character more stupid? How can you make him make worse decisions? And that's even, like you said, that's even a step further than how can you give Ben's eventual line or the narrator line to May, but it's like doubling down on everything we did wrong to get here, and now it's cost another life, which leads me into the final thing we're going to talk about, which is the way the movie ends. Now, this might just be me. It might be, I don't know if I'm as idealistic as I used to be. I don't know. But I don't like leaving my superhero films feeling bummed out. When we got to the end of this movie, I love the camaraderie. And then Dafoe stabs Toby. I thought he was going to die.
I did too.
I thought he killed him. I was like, no. And then he got that look, the same look when he was holding up the building in Spider-Man 2. And I thought that, oh Lord, Awesome Sauce Radio. What you talking about? But anyway, I thought he was a goner. I was like, please don't let the best one of these three Spider-Men, please don't tell me this is his exit thing. But fortunately, he got wounded, but he didn't die. But the how can I say it? Nims said it when you're talking about the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man versus the cause Spider-Man. But
Yeah.
the thing is, what you like about Spider-Man is the fact that when he starts out, he is broke. That he did have a way to get fame and fortune, and his obsession with that cost him his uncle. So he said, I'd rather fight crime, just on my own dimes if I have to. But it's more important that I make a difference for the right than it is that I be famous or rich. You have to love Peter for that. That's right there in the Raimi films. But at the end of this film, they give you a quick glance that his Spider-Man costume is homemade, and the costume does look better than all the Iron Spider stuff. I give you that. But I felt so empty. I felt so cheated. I felt so down. I'm tired of leaving superhero movies and feeling down because it's like you did everything possible that you could to crush Peter like a bug. And at the end, we see him scraping together his life. And then we're going to talk about, also with this, I'm talking about how somehow at the end, and this always amazes me because this is common with humanity. I've done it. We all do it. When it's time to be moral and time to have some sense, you ain't thinking about morality nor sense. Then something happens and all of a sudden, well, we got to do the right thing. Really? How come you couldn't think about the right thing before you made all them dumb choices just 5 minutes ago? But anyway, the idea of him, erasing the memory and then coming face to face, I'm like, if you think about it, that can only be a torment scene. Think about it. Think about if you erase your girlfriend or your wife's memory. You remember her, but she don't remember you. Think about your best bud, your best friend. That can only, why would you go where they are? Because the movie says that he's going to tell them, break the spell and bring them back. And then when he sees how relatively happy they are, or when he realizes, I'm like, you should have realized this at the beginning of the movie. But when he realizes that, he decides not to tell her, and she can feel something between them. She's like, "Do I know you?" She can feel it kind of eating at her conscience and knocking it at the door of her mind. But Peter's like, that kind of thing. And then so we see him with a sewing machine and a homemade Spider-Man costume, and he hears a siren. He jumps out the window, and that's it. It was probably the biggest Debbie Downer I've had in terms of experience since the second Garfield movie, where Gwen died. I'm still not over that. I have never watched that movie again, by the way. I know it's from the comics. I know Gwen had the right clothes. I know, I get it. I have never watched Amazing Spider-Man 2. Okay. I've never watched Amazing Spider-Man 2 again. And I won't. Not just because I don't want to see that stupid version of the Rhino. And you're wasting somebody as good as Giamatti on that. But the fact I am not watching Gwen die ever again is not going to happen. It was so depressing. And then they keep wondering why the movie didn't do as well. I felt the same way here. It was so depressing. I said, let's review. Y'all have crushed this man. The only thing he has left is his life. Okay? His Aunt May is gone. The love of his life is right in front of him, and he doesn't want to pull her back in. So he lets her just continue to forget him. His best friend doesn't know who he is. He's made a fool out of Doctor Strange, and they had the pockets of reality exploding, knowing that the world is about to be crushed if you don't do something, and now you decide to be noble. This man is completely crushed. No Avengers memory, which means no Avengers card, which means no tech, no interest. He has nothing but an empty apartment with no furniture, maybe a bed, a sewing machine, a homemade costume. I'm like, that's who y'all think Spider-Man is? And I was like, I'm tired of feeling bummed, man. I want to feel uplifted. I want to feel inspired. I want to feel like I did, at the end of, Return of the Jedi, where Luke is seeing his work and then he brought his father back to the light side, and his father, recognized the error of his ways before he died. I want to see something that uplifts me, but I don't know. I was just like, this movie has destroyed every character in it. You think about what we've been saying for the last 2 hours? Every character in this movie got destroyed. I'm like, so that's what I mean when I say it's a lot of fun if you don't think about it. But when you get down to it and you really critically examine what they did, everybody's dead or a bad version of themselves, and Peter is the worst. So I don't even know if I want to root for him. I never thought I'd say that. I don't even know that the next time I see Holland's Spider-Man, do I want to root for him? Why do I want to root for you? Because you are going to find a way to screw up everything you touch. So why should I even emotionally invest since I know how the story is going in? You're going to end up the worse for wear. Even at the end of the Chris Evans, Jessica Alba Fantastic Four films, the first film in particular, they did a really good job with Ben's bitter arc. It was too fast, but it's a movie. But Ben Grimm changed his personality. He was withdrawn and angry because, of course, he was. He became a misshapen rock thing. But at the end of that first film, he realized, I want to be on these adventures with my family. So I'm going to accept being the Thing. And he said, no, I'm good. I got Alicia. I got my family. I got a reason to fight. I'm good. I thought that was good. It made me feel better because Ben is the most tragic figure among the four.
Mm-hmm.
But in this film, I'm like, Doctor Strange, stupid, May, dead, MJ, Ned, their memory's gone and they don't know they gone. Do you realize what you did to them? Don't you know how mad you would be if your memory popped back one day and you realize what was done to you? Isn't that what happens to trauma patients? Isn't that what happens when we go through childhood trauma? You block it out. And then one day, something snapped. And you say, wait a minute. Okay? Because somebody else took away your choice from you. And that makes Peter the worst possible version of himself. He took away the choices of almost everyone involved. And the new equilibrium at the end of the film is awful. There's literally nothing good about it. I'm still stunned, if you can't tell by what I'm saying. I'm still stunned that that's where y'all in the Spider-Man movie, really? So let me hear what you guys think about the ending and everything I'm talking about. Let me hear your thoughts. Start with Steve.
I really, 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 really hate the whole hard luck Peter ending. Every time I see it, I can't stand it, because it's always the same thing. It's, I have to sacrifice my personal life. I have to sacrifice everyone I love, so I can be Spider-Man. Because I have to make that choice. No other superhero has to worry about making this choice too often, for the most part. Superman can make this choice, doesn't have to make that choice. Green Lantern doesn't have to make this choice. The Flash doesn't have to make this choice. Captain America doesn't have to make this choice. But God darn it, Spider-Man always has to sacrifice love, sacrifice everyone who cares about him in order to be Spider-Man and do the heroic thing. And it's like, and then he blames the Parker luck. No, it is not the Parker luck. It is your bad decisions coming back to haunt you. This is what this is. And so I'm dealing with two things that really kind of hit me, or at least two perspectives that kept me. One is that they're trying to do the tragic ending, which never works, never ever works. And every time I see it in a movie, it fails, and it fails here too. And the other side of this is, okay, yeah, he finally in the end does tries to fix things and says, okay, I'm not going to hold on to the things that are holding me back. I'm finally going to say, yeah, let's just erase everybody and get rid of the situation. But it's like, it feels more like a punishment, a just punishment for Tom Holland Spider-Man, because he's the one who created the situation. He is the one, through his actions, that got us to this point. He's the one who revealed his identity, to Mysterio. He's the one who trusted Mysterio, thereby making him the threat he was at the end of Far From Home. If that had happened, he would never have gotten his identity revealed. And then to try to fix the identity being revealed, he's the one that pushed the spell to be cast. He's the one who led these supervillains into his house and created that situation. He's the one who took the doohickey away from the Sorcerer Supreme. And all of this, and after all that, now he decides, I'm going to be responsible. With great power comes great responsibility. Now I'm going to be responsible. Too little, too late. You should have been responsible in the last movie. You should have been responsible at the beginning of this movie. Otherwise, you would never have been in this situation. Reality wouldn't be crumbling, and you would still have your friends and your girlfriend. Why in the world? Why in the world are you blaming the Parker luck for this? And don't tell me this is a heroic sacrifice. Don't tell me that this is anything. You had no choice. The only alternative was reality fragmenting. You had no choice. So don't tell me this is heroic. Don't tell me this was a noble sacrifice. No, it's not a noble sacrifice. And it makes you worse. It makes you a worse character. And after, the whole movie where you've been a completely, making terrible decisions left and right, you're forced into a box, and then you make the choice forced into a box, and then you say, I am doing the responsible thing and I'm being heroic. No, you're not. No, you're not. And we don't want to see the consequences of this. And these people are better off not knowing who Peter Parker is. These people are better off with him out of their life. I mean, that's the real thing of it. He is such a messed up person that they are happier not having known him. What does that say about Jim? What does that say about him as a character? And it's, again, I mean, it's just everything that could have gone wrong did. And I will also add that the ending, Toby ended up getting hit by the glider. That is also Peter's fault, because Peter, they messed this up too. Peter really should have been put in the situation where he should have said, okay, Toby's right. I'm not going to give in to revenge. And instead, the only reason that Toby was in that position to get hit in the glider is because he was stopping Holland from making a decision that he knew he would regret.
You mean getting stabbed?
Right, because he'd been there. That was a heroic sacrifice. I am going to risk my life for this, for my brother, basically, my multiversal brothers, let's just put it that way, so that he makes the correct moral choice. So he comes across as more heroic, once again, than Holland is. Because Holland is acting, or Peter 3 is acting, out of a desire for revenge, which he had been told over and over by two people who had been in that situation, that it never leads to anything good. And does he listen to them? No. And in fact, he endangers Toby by putting him in the position that he should never have had to have been into if he had shown an ounce of restraint and started acting like a hero instead of, wanting to make himself feel better by killing this guy, which he should have known from the beginning was wrong. And so, I mean, every decision Tom Holland Spider-Man makes is a bad decision. And Toby ends up looking like the real hero of the entire piece by stopping him at that moment and saying, no, I am going to stand here between you and him, even though I have more reason to hate him than you. I have more reason to hate him because he's the father of my best friend and he destroyed that relationship. He's tried to kill me more than once. All of the things that he's done to me, in the course of the movies that I've been through. He's my arch nemesis. And I am going to save my arch nemesis from you because saving you is more important than making him suffer. And that should have been right there. That should have said, hey, if this guy's willing to do that, maybe I should stop. And what should have happened is that Holland should have said, okay, I am not going to get the revenge because I know that this is not going to end well. This is not what Aunt May would want. And so I'm going to walk away, even though, it doesn't give me the satisfaction and closure that I want. I'm going to sacrifice that and be a hero and actually take responsibility for once in my life. And he doesn't do that. So it's just, once again, bad decision-making on the part of Holland Spidey and everywhere. And so the ending feels like it's just a punishment for a bad character making bad decisions than any kind of reward for saving the world and for setting things right and for being responsible.
Now, two things before I throw it over to Bracy, two things that Steve said I want to key in on. One of them is that he reminded me of something that I forgot to say, and that is that they also didn't realize that once Peter was willing to commit murder, it destroys his character. So once they put Peter in the point where he lost his temper to the point where he was getting ready to take him out, then once again, I said, well, we can't root for you because you're going to commit murder and you know you shouldn't, but you're going to anyway. Someone had to stop you. That means that you would have had Toby Peter not been there. So now you're, they put you in jail for stuff like that, intent to murder. Even if you don't go through with it, if they can prove you intended to murder someone, they do incarcerate you for stuff like that. And I'm like, really? Really? And so that character is destroyed. But the other thing I want to say, keening off of what Steve just said, is that for those of you that are not regular comics readers, it is actually possible for superheroes to have families. If you don't understand that, go all the way back to the Golden Age Flash, start with Jay Garrick. The Flashes, before they messed Barry up and they did the thing with his mom dying and then made Barry kind of like another Peter Parker, before they did all that, the Flashes were the happiest family in comics. Jay had Joan, Barry had Iris, and Wally had Linda. So it's entirely possible. They stopped making Lois Lane be the blindest reporter on Earth, and Clark finally revealed his identity in the 90s, and they got married. And, sometimes they have natural kids, sometimes they have adopted kids, sometimes they have both. But Lois and Clark have been Lois and Clark for like 30 years now. So it is entirely possible. That kind of stuff doesn't work with Batman, but it's what Steve said, and it's the passion he said it with that I echo. They can't let Peter be happy. He always has to be not just a loser, but the worst loser possible. And I'm tired of it, okay? Because the boy needs a W somewhere in life at some point. He needs to win at something, and we're not, we could do a whole nother show on One More Day. For those of you that don't understand what One More Day is, it's a comic storyline, but long story short, spoiler alert, Mephisto, which is Marvel's version of Satan, I won't say tricks, offers Peter a chance to get out of the situation he's in by stealing his marriage. So he erases his marriage to Mary Jane, and then later on we find out that Mary Jane was pregnant. And then there's another offshoot where that ends up being Mayday Parker, Spider-Girl, and that whole thing. But One More Day was basically the editorial staff saying we can't have a happy married 28-year-old Peter Parker. So he's got to be 15 again, a loser, blah, blah, blah. It was so awful. It sent shockwaves through the comic community that we've never recovered from. Because we're like, y'all really let the devil just steal his marriage? And it was awful. So that's why I understand, echo, and agree with Steve's passion in saying, why do they have to keep making this man always have to give up everybody and everything when you have other heroes that don't? Even if Batman couldn't sustain a marriage, Batman always has Grayson, Barbara, and Alfred. Even if the family doesn't grow any bigger than that, Batman, even though he claims to be a loner, he's always had Alfred. He always has Grayson, and he always has Barbara. But Peter? Anyway, Bracy, thoughts on the ending?
Yeah, I'm going to make you feel even worse.
Well, great.
Yeah, I'm going there. So let me get this cat out of the way. Settle down, buddy. The movie doesn't just end poorly for Spider-Man. Nothing is really resolved. All this trouble they went through to cure everybody is complete and total BS as well. Because what's going to happen? The spell is going to send you back to the moment before the spell grabbed you. So all those guys are either going to be in jail or dead, just like they were before. Doesn't do anything for them. They all go back to their fates. All this pain, all this suffering, Aunt May dying, all of that is all really for nothing. So the movie is a complete and total bummer by the end. Now, they think they're giving you the Spider-Man that you're like, look, the most comic accurate Spider-Man right now. He's poor, he's broke, he's struggling, and look, he's sewing his own suit. He doesn't have any fancy technology. This is the Spider-Man that you grew up with. This is the Spider-Man from the comics. Like, yeah, it's so depressing. He's got nobody. He's got nothing. No one knows him. And that's a crazy thing. No one knows him. Where's the Social Security card? How did he get money for the apartment? Is he shaking down the muggers? Is that how he's paying for anything? He doesn't exist. Strange even said, you don't exist. So the ending doesn't even make sense. And then they try to like, oh, but look, he's in the costume, he's swinging, he's happy. Yeah, that's the only time he's ever going to be happy because his life sucks. sucks enormously. Oh man, I can't stand it. Because like you said, the thing that I always loved about Spider-Man growing up is no matter how bad his life was, he could get out, he could be Spider-Man, and he tried to make the best of everything. His quips weren't just as a way to distract people, but it's this sense of humor and this personality he developed, which allowed him to become friends with a lot of superheroes. People genuinely liked him. He was a very likable dude. He had a good heart. He did good things, and he struggled. And I can appreciate, America is a country that loves the underdog. And like, I can appreciate this guy because, he just struggles and he keeps his head down and he does it. And there was always the promise that eventually someday he would come out ahead. And eventually we started to see that. He married a supermodel. He started to teach at, Empire State University. We wanted to see the character progress. Now, I'm glad you brought up One More Day because that is what has happened here. He has been one more day. Magic has once again erased him, taken away everything that he has, everything that made him happy, removed his relationships, and he is starting at zero. This is the whole thing Joe Quesada wanted to do when he editorialized this. He didn't understand Spider-Man progressing. He didn't understand people growing up with Spider-Man wanting to see the character have more, any more than this movie does. And so they've erased it. And let me tell you something. I have not purchased a single Spider-Man comic since One More Day. And you've just gone and done that to this character movie-wise. Guess what's not happening? I'm not buying another Spider-Man ticket. Not with the Tom Holland one, at least. Maybe if Sony does something cool with Garfield and Maguire, I might pop in. Or maybe I'll just wait till it comes on some streaming service where I don't have to pay for it. But I'm not going to a theater for it. Not after this. That's where I'm at.
Wow, that was intense, and that's how intense this ending was. And yeah, I did pop back. Excuse me, I did pop back in for a Superior Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the way it ended, but I like the idea. But once again, heroes don't max their powers until villains take their bodies over. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I did kind of want to watch it. I did think, at least at the beginning, it was a good idea. But I hear what you're saying, man. I got off Spider-Man comic books, and I had bought so many Spider-Man comic books up to that point.
I mean, like, yeah, I was a Spider-Man super fan. Like when he had in the 80s and 90s, when he had like 6 titles or whatever going on at the time, I was collecting all of it.
Well,
He was my number one hero forever until One More Day, and then I just haven't been back since.
Only character that I multi-titled like that back then was Batman. So yeah, I understand exactly Batman and Spider-Man and X-Men. So I do understand what you're saying. But I mean, when you listen to what Jeff is saying, man, when you make decisions in a film that are so bad, it knocks out your fan base. It knocks out people that have been supporting you their entire lives. It makes people feel like I don't want to spend any more time, money, or emotional energy investing in the characters that you've created that have been popular for the last 50 to 80 years, and you write them so badly until.
And consider this: I've been buying comics for about 45 years. That is a long time investment, long time customer loyalty, and you just threw that away.
That is just not good, folks. All right, Nims.
I'm going to half agree with you guys and half disagree with you guys.
Of course you are.
Have fun.
So the actual ending of the movie, where they resolve the whole plot, I can't stand. You guys have hit it. I don't need to talk about it anymore. It's pretty terrible. The whole, like Steve pointed out, the whole problem is a problem of Peter's making in the first place. I hated what happened with May. I hated what happened as far as, Peter wanted to kill Norman. All of it. All of it was terrible. I absolutely agree. I think it was out of character. And here's the thing. You know me. I'm a different person. I like my tragic arcs. I like my tragic heroic arcs. And so if this was the origin story for this version of Spider-Man, written a lot better with a completely different plot at the end, I wouldn't mind the way this movie ended up. I really wouldn't. And I say that because to me, like I said earlier, Peter is defined by his martyr complex. Peter sabotages everything in his life on purpose, whether he knows it or not. He doesn't think he deserves happiness, just the way Batman doesn't think he deserves happiness as Bruce Wayne. So even though he has the Bat family, he will go out of his way to sabotage everything that has to do with Bruce Wayne being a happy, fulfilled person. You know, and they're two separate people, and I think we all get that. Bruce Wayne and Batman, completely separate entities. So I understand that. If this was the beginning of an arc of even a 3-story trilogy where we leave Peter here with a place to go from here, I would understand it. And I even understand him not, and this is why I understand why I knew he would never say to Zendaya, look, we had, you know, I called her Zendaya, not MJ or Michelle. We had something. Let's try and rebuild this, because Peter doesn't think he deserves to rebuild it. Peter hates himself. Peter thinks he doesn't deserve happiness, and I'm going to share a little bit. Being a good Catholic boy, I lived a long life and had to go through a lot of therapy to come to the realization that I deserve happiness because I lived a martyr complex. I understand Peter really, really well, and sabotaging all the good things in your life and trying to destroy and throw away the good stuff in your life because you think you don't deserve it. I get it. I get it. That said, I enjoy those kinds of arcs, and I hear what you're saying about leaving the movie feeling that way. If I thought there was a way to redeem it and then eventually tie up the story so that we have some closure, I don't necessarily need happiness. I need closure. That's what I need. I would be fine with it. You know, the problem I have is I don't trust them to conclude the story arc and give us closure. That is the real problem I have with it. So, for instance, at the end of Lord of the Rings or Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien leaves us on a big Debbie Downer. Boromir's dead. He's floating down the river, and they're going off into Mordor. It's horrible. And at the end of the book, we don't get I mean, there's some happiness. Sam gets a happy ending, sort of. You know, Frodo certainly doesn't get a happy ending, but I get closure from it. And so the heroic arc makes sense. I understand that that Frodo has a sense of duty, you know, a sense of responsibility, and he's also been wounded. So I get it. I buy it. I like it because that's just my personality. I tend to like those type of things. So I hear what you're saying. So that's why I said it may be more like I 75% agree with you guys and 25% don't, you know, but I kind of get, but I think I'm doing the work of the movie as well because I
get your perspective. I get your perspective. I think what they did with this movie is Garfield gets the moment you're talking about, but I'm like you. I don't think we'll have faith that Holland will get that moment.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people said it was redemption, which to me is ridiculous. There's no redemption for Anakin killing all them kids, and just because he saved Zendaya doesn't change the fact that Gwen is dead. So I didn't get why people say that was maybe that's
it's not redemption for him, but it's closure.
Yeah. So maybe. Like it. Yeah. So I mean, I think with Andrew Garfield, to speak to your point, I think that he erased a demon. And that he was able to save this person versus saving Gwen. I think personally, that they would have been much better off and really given us some stakes here if Gwen Stacy had come back and been held captive by the Sinister Five. And then this time he has to make a choice whether to save her or save the universe.
Yeah. That's brutal.
Holy cow. Now
that's brutal.
There are no stakes in saving Zendaya.
Yeah. There was no stakes. True. But, and the one good part was that he flew down to catch her instead of using rubbing to catch her, so her neck wouldn't snap again. But once again, it's comic book physics because I know if you flatten your body, you become more aerodynamically whatever. But he flew. Go back and watch it again. He didn't fall faster. He flew and caught her. But okay,
I will say this: if they had done that. Mm-hmm. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would have dominated the entire ending and been the hero we all wanted and deserved.
She would become the story. So
at least in Spider-Man 3, when he saves Gwen, he actually launches himself off a piece of debris. So he's moving faster than terminal velocity. Then
So
the only characters that come out in a good place in these movies is the alternate Peters.
So I think, and just to wrap up real quick, I think the real problem of writing here is that too many of these writers don't put themselves into the characters. They just don't put themselves into the characters. Andrew Garfield, they did that, I think, for a cool moment, when really Andrew Garfield is doing that because he's psychologically broken from that moment. And he's just like, he's willing to die there rather than go through that moment again. That's a psychological trauma. Mm-hmm. He's not doing it for a cool scene where we can all applaud in the movie theater. He's doing it because he's been broken.
He's been broken, and he doesn't want Holland Peter to go through that because that pain is too terrible to bear. I agree with that. But I'm just saying, I also agree, however, that if you put Gwen anywhere in this mix, the movie will be about her. I guarantee you. Everything else would just kind of fade away. So I don't know if they're going to do, because they did Spider-Gwen in Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm sure she'll be back for that sequel. I don't know if they're ever going to introduce, as much as I love Gwen Stacy, as much as I've always loved Gwen Stacy, there comes a point of overkill, there comes a point of saturation, there comes a point where everything doesn't need to be about her. And, they had an arc in the comics where she literally was, every superhero was like Gwen World. I'm like, wait, y'all, wait. That's a little too far.
I think if they had put Gwen Stacy in here and that had been part of why they were going after the Sinister Five, and then Tom Holland Spider-Man has to see Andrew Garfield let Gwen Stacy die this time in order to heal the universe. Talk about teaching a lesson to Parker about responsibility. That would have been the lesson. So.
No, that's good. That would have been a good ending, but I wouldn't have wanted to watch it because I don't want to watch Gwen die again.
Well, and that's why probably nothing I ever write will be made into a movie. So.
not a happy movie.
Definitely not a happy movie. We need like a
rated. That's why you write horror.
We need like a rated NM for Nemesis. Y'all need to know what y'all watching here. Nemesis done wrote this one, so don't get your hopes up now. But anyway, on that note, we'll wrap this up. I knew we had a lot to say, and there's actually a lot more we could say, but we hitting the 3-hour mark. But it's just it's a challenge being a comic book geek these days because so many things have been written in such ways that they departed from the reasons that we love the character, and that's what we've been outlining in detail during this broadcast, that we like Peter, we love Peter, we identify with Peter, we get what drives him, we've always rooted for him because he's been so likable even in the face of great adversity. But y'all made him unlikable, y'all made him wreck the world for no reason, and y'all left him destitute. Why how does that, who wins? Okay, and I mean the only thing I would have bought, and I know this is a whole nother can of worms. Instead of the post-credit scenes being of Venom, which I thought was pretty funny, should have been of Mephisto. When we first meet the Avengers, we get a couple of post-credit scenes with Thanos. This should have been Mephisto in the post-credit scenes. You know why? That opens the door for saying all of this terrible bad luck was because he has been orchestrating things that have been going on, and he's their version of the devil. So, of course, it's going to be tragic, but that means there's hope.
I mean, that's great because that can tie into things like Agatha Harkness, Scarlet Witch, Adam Warlock.
That's what I'm saying. If we know that he's actually been the one, if he's been influencing, there was a scene in Titans where I forgot who initiated it, but there was some type of influence that went out and kind of changed the world around him. It was a reality.
Trigon.
Was it Trigon? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because Joker was dead, then he came back. So if this had been Mephisto in the post-credit scenes, it actually would have given us as the audience a ray of hope that all of these bad things that happened to Peter were being orchestrated by the most malevolent presence in the MCU, and he can be fought. And then, like you said, you introduce another magic user, you introduce somebody on his level, and all of a sudden, maybe Peter's life could turn around. Maybe some of that stuff could be erased, or maybe some of that stuff could be redone. Because in the comics, there's this moment where Peter's spell had everybody forget him, like this one. But the spell was, if I ever show my face and take off my mask, everything's coming back. In the comics, he reveals himself to the Fantastic Four. And Johnny says, "Welcome back, Pete." And they were all so happy to see him. We could have a moment like that if we knew that all of this was because of Mephisto, and then he gets defeated and his influence is removed. All kinds of good things can happen like that. But as it stands, it's just like, well, we might as well see if we can get some hope out of Multiverse of Madness, which I don't think there's going to be a lot of hope in that film either, because Wanda's going to be the villain, and maybe that might lead to House of M. I don't know, but I can't see anything good happening. That's all I'm saying. So on that note, again, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Nims.
No problem. Sorry to be always the one who is like, I got to put a little bit of other stuff in there. So.
No, man. It's always good to have some pepper in the soup.
All right.
Thanks so much, Bracy.
Hey, Nims, let's not forget how I was with the Alien series. So we can't always agree. And that's what makes part of this fun, is seeing everybody's different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, I really wanted to like this movie. It just didn't come out the way that we were hoping. And I know that a lot of people like this movie, and I can totally understand why, but I just feel like if you start looking at the layers underneath the surface, man, it just falls apart. And unfortunately, sometimes that's how it plays out.
I done told y'all Steve is the most optimistic of all of us, and if he don't like your movie, you have messed up. Ain't no hope in it nowhere. Anyway, I want you to check out our other channels on United Capes Podcast Network, on Comic Crusaders. We've got a lot of different kinds of shows. We've got retro shows. We've got every kind of sci-fi, fantasy, geek flavor you might want. We got interviews with content creators. We have it on Comic Crusaders. So definitely check that out. Check out the website, Comic Crusaders. Check out our different channels on YouTube. And this crew will see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers. We're out.
Everybody.
Spoilers.